Might be a long time.
Shush.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday, July 6th, 2023 Conservation Commission meeting for the town of Yarmouth. Before I get in, I have to have a spiel here for you. So this is to formally advise that as required by General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, as extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, the Yarmouth Conservation Commission will hold a public meeting at the date and time noted above. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. Before we get into the rest of the agenda, we actually have a brief presentation. This is a project, it's about the project completion announcement from Natural Resources Division concerning the Bradford Hall Blueberry Patch Eagle Scout project. Bill, you're up.
Well, anyway, we really appreciate the commission's support and the recognition of Eagle Scout Eddie Newell, who came to me a year or so ago with the proposed project of pruning the blueberry patch in an effort to make it a healthier, more productive patch. It got overgrown, inundated with poison ivy and whatnot. So if we look back to before, this was, off season, but the before picture, there was other debris and dead wood and stuff that was scattered throughout. So what they did, they consulted with
Sign it.
a professional blueberry
Sign it anyway. We'll
grower
have Catherine
in the
fix
Lower
it.
Cape area, and upon their recommendation, they cut the bushes all the way down to the ground. And if you look, we'll fast forward to today. There's already berries all over all of the bushes, so it's been a wonderful result, and it's a great public benefit project. And I guess the final phase of the project, although it's been recommended that maybe maintenance can be done by the Eagle Scouts, in years to come. But the final phase, I think, of Eddie's project is to have a sign installed. I guess back in 2011, maybe, the selectmen named this conservation area after Brad Hall, former conservation administrator who had retired. So Eddie had done some research and thought it would be nice to have a sign recognizing that it's Brad Hall Conservation Area. That's a proposal. There's a slide in here that shows just
Wow.
yeah, that's from today.
And here's a sign.
And this is just not the sign, but an idea. We'd like to probably come in front of the commission with an idea of a sign and maybe have a little ribbon cutting thing and invite Brad.
Great.
That'd be good.
Well done.
Well done, Eddie.
Nice job, Eddie.
Eddie, did you want to say anything?
I'd just like to thank the Natural Resources Department for all the help. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them getting a project together. It was a lot of fun. Help the kids out, get requirements signed off, help the community. It was a good project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
I'll add there were some other contributors. The DPW helped with some of the brush removal, and then we even had
Robert Childs.
Childs had accepted it at no charge
Great.
because of the Eagle Scout project. So, all right.
Nice job. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you again, and we will be sending you a letter of acknowledgement as well.
I have it right here.
We have to get a new signature though, so. Well, but we will send that to you to make sure
Yeah,
everything's
David,
good.
will you still sign it in the empty space and we'll write it? My administrator
You're gonna write it
got
in?
some edits,
All right,
yeah.
I'm just gonna say, thank you, I just want to come back. Thank you very much.
Where is that place?
Good luck.
Are you officially an Eagle Scout now?
Yep, I became an Eagle Scout last December.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
Yeah.
just for the record, could you let the public know where that patch is? And,
No, no. Oh, what are you thinking?
no, we can't do that?
See the blueberries on those bushes?
I know.
For the record, could you let us know?
Baker Road.
No.
Or Frank Baker Road, yeah.
Frank Baker Road.
Frank Baker Road,
Yes.
okay.
It's next
Right
to
off of
the
28.
Old Irish Village.
Oh, yeah.
28.
God.
Put that in. There you
Yeah,
go down there.
okay, all right. I'll bring my blueberry pie recipe over there and see what I can do. Thank you very much.
But you really should
Good
go
job.
to the one over at the Bray Farm instead, you know. Anyhow, well, thank you again for all that hard work. That's hard going. I know I've done the same type of project, so it's truly appreciated. All right, moving on, we're moving into our stated agenda. Before I do that, I do want to let people know we've actually had a couple of continuance requests. So the following projects are going to be continued to July 20th of this year, which is our next meeting. The first one is for SE 83-2392 for 138 Kroll Road. For SE 83-2393 for 33 Prince Road. And for SE 83-2397 for 52 Prince Road. All three of those are going to be continued to July 20th. So if you were here for those, you can go ahead. Just remember, you will not be notified again, but just keep in mind that it's July 20th, 2 weeks from today. Okay? July 20th, okay? Same time. Okay? All right, first order of business for the meeting then is an emergency certification. We have-
Nope.
Huh?
Do you have an updated agenda?
You bet? Huh?
We took that one off.
Oh, you took that off.
Yes.
33 or 50?
Never mind that. Our first order of business then is a request for determination of applicability for Andrew Gallagher, 50 Neptune Lane, proposed addition, gravel driveway, and septic system and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Is there somebody in the, okay, you want to come on up to the podium here, or to the table? When you get settled, just state your name and briefly describe the project you'd like to do.
Good evening. Andy Gallagher. Karen, my wife Karen.
Gallagher.
Yes, we have a single-family home. It's small. We'd like to expand it with a small mudroom, and a family room, and a one-car garage. And we are going to be updating our septic system at the same time.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board?
Have them.
No, it's out there.
Okay, Brittany, anything?
No questions.
Okay, anybody in the audience have any comments, questions, concerns on this project? Is there anybody in Zoom who has any comments, questions, concerns? Raise your hand digitally. I see none. Unless there's any further discussion, can I have a motion for a -2?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. That's about as easy as we can make it.
Sounds good.
You're all good. So the negative determination is actually a good thing for you. It means that you don't have to do any further filing with Conservation Commission. It'll take a couple days for the office to get the determination written up and approved or signed off on. So give it the middle of next week or so, okay? And then I'll just give Brittany a yell, and she can get that determination to you then, okay? So you're all set with, at least as far as conservation, you're all set, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you
Thank
all
you.
very much.
Thank you, Brittany, for your help, by the way.
Yes,
Sure, no
You,
problem.
really-
If I may say too, everybody in the conservation office was very helpful, very positive, very friendly. Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Andrew.
Thank you all.
Did she actually?
Okay, next order of business is a request for an approval of a revised plan. It's for SE 83-2303 for 40 Mayflower Terrace, proposed fence, kayak rack, regrading, restoration, plantings, and gravel under the first floor deck. Mr. Cheney, how are you today?
Very good, sir, and you all. Phil Cheney, landscape designer. I'm representing the Lees on this project. They wanted to get a finished landscape plan so they could finish off their project, which included a first floor deck that was established. And in the course of doing so, we uncovered a few things that needed to be rectified, both in help with Brittany, with staff, and just in observations on the property itself. So where there is some mitigation that's currently already required by the original approval, and on the plan that you have in front of you, that would be the lighter green areas that are marked there as original 600 square feet of mitigation. I did make a minor change to that because the engineer showed that going right up to the existing shed, which was going to be repaired in place, and it was. And there was a door right on that end of the shed. So I thought it made sense to just take that area of mitigation and move it down closer to the water on the southeastern end and add it to that mitigation. That makes sense. Also, where that near the shed mitigation was proposed to go, a kayak rack was located. I'm not really sure when. It looks fairly recent, but I think it makes good sense for the property with the dock and everything that's going on there. So I just suggested relocating the kayak rack so the mitigation can go where it was originally prescribed. And I think that'll serve a useful function. Now, when the deck was installed, they also, the contractor and the owners built a retaining wall on the north side of the property. And that was apparently not approved in the original filing. It makes good sense to have that there. It's generally upholding the bank pretty well. It needs to be a little bit more completion, as you can see on the top of the wall in that photograph. It doesn't go quite high enough. So in my plan, I'm showing a small wing wall going out perpendicular to the foundation and to that wall above it, so that chunk of soil there doesn't collapse and erode down into the resource area. And that can just taper down to grade pretty quickly and solve some problems. That grade in there can just be feathered, and I show some plantings going in there to restore that formerly vegetated area. Additionally, as you see on my plan at the lower, farther end of the wall, some other vegetation was removed during the construction of the wall. So that dark green vegetation there is some new restored planting that I'm showing using some native species in there, which I think will bring back to at least as good as it was, if not better, with some better species. There's some invasives in the area. So I think that's going to be somewhat of an improvement, and will fix the damage that was done. Underneath the deck, they'd like to just finish that with a small, 30-inch by 6-foot paver landing at the doorway underneath, and then just finish off the remainder of the underneath of the deck with gravel. I have the rough fescue lawn extending up to the piers a couple feet under the deck because it's high enough where a little bit of light can penetrate and get a little bit more vegetation in there. I'm showing a restore. Originally, there were some steps on the south end of the house, and those had since been removed, and we'd like to just restore those. I'm showing where those would be with some cheek walls in there as well. And then completing in the front, trying to simplify, get rid of a lot of existing tie walls, improve the grading, replacing the front step and putting a new walkway in there. We can raise the grade and eliminate the tie walls that are existing in that area now up in the very front yard. So that'll simplify that, and we can just get that seated down. And then also I'm showing some finish foundation plantings in the area there. In that case, I'm using strictly natives and native clones to accomplish that in that space. The existing asphalt driveway would be resurfaced, and they would like to put some fencing on the south property line. And I show that along that south line, about 30 feet of 6-foot privacy fencing, which would take us down to the 35-foot line, and then just some rail fencing that would extend down to the top of the coastal bank, just to help define their property. I think perhaps that covers the changes, the requests that we're making. They may have some questions.
I'm sorry, I missed one thing. So the privacy fencing goes from where to
Yeah,
where?
from basically the street corner property line, so the very southern end of the property corner there, and it would extend down to the 35-foot coastal, from the coastal bank line.
Okay, and then what's the rest?
And the rest would be split rail fence from there down to the top of coastal bank. So it'd be another 35 feet long
Vision in the plan.
in that area there.
Thank you.
And the 6-foot privacy fence would have the 6-foot clearance underneath for wildlife.
Okay, and so the deck we approved previously.
Correct.
You're just asking for the gravel underneath, correct?
Correct, yep.
All right, so I have an issue with that. I mean, we're in the 35-foot. I mean, the deck itself is in the 35-foot. We will allow decks, that's about the only thing that we would allow in the 35-foot. With all of that gravel's hardscape, and I think I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess because it's gravel, I'd be willing to consider it. But it would have to have mitigation. I would think that we would need to see mitigation for that.
Significant.
It's hardscape. It's in the 35-foot. If, we're looking at new regulations coming forward in the near future. I don't even know that we necessarily allow this, but if we were going to do that, then you would have to do a lot of mitigation. I mean, so I'd like to see some sort of mitigation along the top of the coastal bank, at least develop, because right now we're calling for seeded lawn, right? All the way down to the bank.
Those areas there, yes, that are.
Yeah, so I'm not real comfortable unless we get some sort of protection along the top of that bank with this significant mitigation area. That would be my opinion. I'll let Brett, that's my only comment on this. I mean, the fence, as long as you keep 6-inch clearance, I guess that's, I don't. And what kind of, I'm sorry, what kind of, you said split rail, right?
The upper part would be board fence, 6-foot
And
board
then the
fence,
rest
and then
is
the lower part would be
split
split
rail
rail, yes.
below the 35?
Yes.
Okay, so if we're doing 35, from the 35 to the top of bank as split rail, then and then just the rest of it has to be 6 inches of clearance below the bottom, between the bottom of the
Yes.
fence and the grade.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
have an
stated
issue
on the
with fence
plan,
then.
yeah.
Anybody else?
I agree.
Well, I know we already approved this back up here, but I'm looking at the resurfacing the existing asphalt, and it looks like the pitch of that will all run it right down the bank, whatever runoff that comes from it. And is there anything that you have to stop the runoff from running down?
That's just an unchanged situation. It's not going to change the grade of the way the water's been running. I think, there was no real signs of erosion before that I'm aware of, so I don't think it's sufficient to cause a problem. I think the clients would probably be interested in stopping that, but that hasn't come up as a concern. Now, regarding the gravel under the deck, I'm not sure what was anticipated to be under there. If that was intended or anticipated to be just bare soil. If the deck were much lower, it's gonna, nothing really gonna grow there other than weeds at this point now. I'm not sure the purpose of a mitigation on something. It's mitigation already being done for the square footage of the deck. That's my understanding, that's what that's for. And so to be mitigating for the same area twice seems kind of, frankly, I've just never heard of that before. If the deck were much lower, I don't think anybody would be even giving it second thought.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like if it's low, so why couldn't you put something in there?
It's just perpetual shade under the deck, and, water percolation from the deck itself is going to be spotty. It's just, I don't see that being a practical solution under the deck.
Brittany, if I remember correctly, the plan they came to last time that we asked them to change had some kind of fire escape under the deck, is that right? Like,
They wanted to put a patio under
Patio.
there.
and so they're moving from the patio to the gravel.
Yes, but both are considered hardscape.
Okay. I just want to make sure my memory is right.
We'll get a fair amount of seasonal sun, too. I realize that it's seasonally, it will get sunrise probably half of the day. I think so.
Half the day?
Well,
If
third.
its faces due east,
I
it's
understand,
going to
but-
get a little bit of early morning sun, which is not particularly strong, and then it's going to be in deep shade for the rest of the day.
the day, yes, but I think it will get some sunlight for the portion of the day that may result in some more growth under there. I live there, so I'm telling you what I get.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just anticipating,
And if I may,
Yeah.
so if that, what Mr. Bishop is saying is half a day of sun, so it's pretty common, and I don't know if this would be allowable, but shade gardens typically only require a half a day of sun.
and I'm disputing that half a day of sun vigorously.
Well, maybe we gotta go back to the drawing board and get some data about it, see how long the sun does shine underneath that deck.
Seasonally.
Well, so
It's-
My
it's
question
not
about
really
that, though, if you put if a patio, a regular, paver patio or something, you'd have the deck and that, it would probably call for additional mitigation. And now the gravel is being defined as hardscape, so wouldn't the same requirement exist, that additional mitigation, as the chairman has indicated, might be appropriate?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul, before but just to let you, I guess I have to backpedal a little bit here, but it's a 10-foot by
45,
45,
45.
so 450 square feet. We're getting 600 square feet of mitigation. I don't know.
Not even 2 to 1.
It's not, yeah, it's 1.5 to 1. I find it hard to believe, I can't believe I voted for this, but,
What did we vote for? I don't think we voted for the patio.
Deck.
Did we vote for the
well, it
deck?
doesn't matter, but and Phil is right. If the mitigation was designed for the patio, or, sorry, for the deck alone,
It would still be insufficient to our current
It's
standards.
insufficient, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we also have the corner of the house that should also be included
Right.
in that, that's all within that 35 foot. So,
This is not a new house.
No, but if I remember
but it
correctly.
was bigger, isn't this bigger than what it was?
Oh, I don't believe so. I think this is just about the deck.
Well, if I remember correctly, originally, the original proposal had nothing underneath the house up to about where the door was. It was all natural dirt or whatever. I remember going over there and saying, how did this happen? So, did we approve this change? I don't think we did. I think we just asked them to come back with a better plan.
I think in this plan here, it appears that there was a smaller deck out there, which was then enlarged to the existing, to the deck that you see now. I can see stairs and so forth and a deck there.
I recalled the deck, but then they dug it all out from underneath there.
Right.
Yeah.
It was, originally it was all natural.
Yeah, it was all
Right up
natural
against the
halfway,
wall.
it was,
So
yeah.
so there would have been no argument, because it would have been bare soil right up against the bottom of the deck before they had regraded and cleared it out without permitting,
Oh, that's right.
as these contours.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember being over there and saying how they do this.
I'm not, what I'm seeing there, and again, I was not involved in that part, so I'm speculating a little bit myself, but I see two labels there. Right there in the center, it says first floor elevated deck walkout under, okay? I believe that's referring to the deck that was existing before, and if you pan the plan up, you see the arrow, proposed 12-foot by 45-foot first floor deck with balcony up above.
I can show you the walkout. It was only room for a door. It wasn't the whole width of the house. So the walkout section was much, much smaller than it is now.
Yeah, I'm just speculating from the plan that you were showing there. It showed a deck that looked like it was about 2/3 of the area.
Hold on. We might have it here.
So there's the grade that it used to be. I guess there was more space. It was like a garage door, but it was all elevated. And they cut this all out.
And it looks like there was a deck, as you can see, where the, you see where the new plywood is on the right side? That seems to correspond with that
Excavation must have been-
previous plan, which shows the deck stopping there. And so that, from that, the left 2/3 of the house had a deck on it. And so I think that's why the mitigation isn't for an entire new deck, is because there was a substantial deck there originally.
Right, but if we step back to the original
See that plan? May I?
Yeah, I see.
Step
Here's
up.
I mean, you can see the picture here, up here.
Right.
So what Phil is saying is correct. The left side of the house
Yeah,
is,
this little bit of
has
deck.
a walkout.
So I'm looking at this here, where the stairway going down was an existing deck before this was part of the whole approval. And then the new deck was what the request was for, which is why, yes, there isn't
Put the wall in without.
a huge amount of mitigation.
There still may be a reason for us to require additional mitigation for all of the grading that was done, not according to this plan.
I can certainly understand that. I've just never, in all my decades of doing this, had double mitigation for a deck and what's underneath it. It's always been
Yeah, and I don't think
square
that's what
footage
we
is
were.
square footage, so.
I'm conceding that, that portion of it, Phil,
Yeah.
where it says the first floor elevated deck walkout under, that's, you can see that's what he was referring to. So we
Right.
have an additional, I mean, again, if we don't have any mitigation calculation table here on the plan, so, mitigation required. 220
550.
square feet of additional deck. So they're giving the 3-to-1.
Where are you reading that?
Mm.
This one says
There,
1
buffer
to 1.
disturbance, see the buffer disturbance? To 0 to 35 foot, 220 square feet of additional deck area.
It says 515.
Hmm?
Revised deck plan 10/8/21.
It's the mitigation required, not the,
8/30/21.
This must have been
8/21.
revised, so
That's
they
why.
actually only did a 1-to-1 ratio.
Eight, 20/21.
I don't know if that, does that say 515 square feet of additional deck area? Because that must be a typo,
It does.
because that whole deck isn't that large, I don't believe.
That is what it says.
Yeah, it says 515 square feet of additional deck area.
Okay,
This is the approved plan, 10/8/2021.
okay,
So you're,
yeah.
we're going backwards here now because
Claiming ignorance on that. I
mitigation
don't-
required was 515 at 1-to-1. I don't know where we went from 3-to-1. Or, well, originally they were proposing 2-to-1. Then they went to 1-to-1. So, I mean, we obviously approved this plan, the 10/8/21 plan. The commission approved that at 1-to-1 mitigation.
You also included a smaller deck and no wall.
It was 515 square
No
feet.
digging out,
I'm sorry, what?
and none of the excavation that
Right,
occurred.
which is why we came, last time we said, how did you change all these things that weren't approved? The wall being one, the, whatever was next to the walk-in, and the deck was smaller. They went ahead and built the wall, put in the deck, without our prior approval.
We also have a note that says once the dock is replaced, did we do that recently?
It's not in yet, but once they're having a new dock put in right here, and then this area would be filled in.
Okay, so you
And
still have
area
that one
would
on,
be-
okay.
Yeah.
Because that's not on, I mean, that's a handwritten note on the plan.
Oh, it's in the order of conditions, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to live with what the commission approved, but it doesn't mean I have to approve anything more, so, and that's how I feel. I'm not gonna approve anything else unless there's some sort of increase in mitigation along the top of the bank, so. That's my vote. I'm just one person.
I say, excuse me, then an alternative then would be just to leave bare soil under the deck, because that's what was approved.
I'm not sure that would be sufficient since there was all that regrading and the wall put in. So there has to be, I think, at least some sort of additional mitigation. Just the amount may be different, whether you want to put gravel down there or not, depending on what the commission decides.
I mean, I don't think I'm asking for all that much to put a buffer strip along the top of the coastal bank. I don't know how we didn't do that in the first place, but we didn't. But I think if you come back with this is a significant change, and I would say you need to give more mitigation, because you somehow, and again, not your fault, the other engineer, somehow we got snookered, folks. I mean, I didn't, that's all it is, like, it's a 1-to-1 mitigation. We don't allow for one-to-one mitigation ever, so, but that's what we approved.
I think what we approved, again, was no wall and a shorter deck.
The deck
So
is the size that it was approved,
It is?
yes.
But the thing that wasn't approved was
The regrade.
all the excavation underneath the deck.
And the wall.
Created the wall.
In my mind, the thing is, if that still existed and the deck was built over it, there would be more control of kind of what happened with the terrain and so on and so forth. In case of water or whatever, that would be protecting, and that would be planted, that could be a decent runoff. But that was all just excavated, and it created the problem. Am I misunderstanding?
No?
I think
That-
you're
And
right.
that excavation should not have been done, is what we discovered. I remember going out there, and that was what we said, why is this all excavated this way? Because that wasn't approved.
And the red grading lines are existing grade now, that this is what they've done, right, on this plan?
No,
That's what they're proposing still.
the purple is proposed, except it doesn't account for the excavation.
Yeah, that's, to clarify, I'm showing those as proposed grades, as in they vary from the existing grades that were there. I think that's mostly pretty close to that now, just with the, I say, the excavation that was done back there.
Yeah, except for this corner.
Well, I hate to say this then, but if there's proposed regrading going on, then why isn't this an amended order? Why are we doing this as a revised plan? Because the original didn't say, the original plan and project didn't say anything about grading, correct?
Correct.
So
There you go.
I think we have to, I mean, this has to be an amended order. I don't see how this can't be an amended order, am I right?
You're correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see anything, any way around that. I thought those were existing.
Again, just to reiterate, currently existing is just as the wall is currently existing. That's, that's pretty much where the site is now. And then I was just looking with this plan to try to finish things up with what's there.
So the regrading is necessary because of the excavation, correct? So, so problems were created because of the fact that the plan wasn't followed.
I think it's called self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if if what I think Ed is calling for is more mitigation to, help correct this, I think that's a small price to pay, isn't it? And maybe it's more complicated than that in terms of the amended order.
Yeah, I just don't see how we can do this on a revised plan because it amended, I mean, this is a change from what the plan, what the abutters were given and notified as to the project type. So,
It just says construction of an elevated deck balcony over the footprint of an existing elevated deck within the buffer zone to a salt marsh, coastal beach, and land containing shellfish. So that's not even an accurate description of, because they built 2 new decks. Where'd my photos go?
yeah, I'm sorry, Phil, but I think what I would, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, if you want us to vote on this as a revised plan, we can do that, but I'm not,
I understand.
I'm not
the
gonna
client's
support
at
it.
mercy. I told him I don't, it's
the
never
more we
clear to
look
me
into it-
what needs to be filed in a case like this. And, if your determination is that it really, it should be a revised order, an amended order, I'm sorry, then, so be it. I was hoping, for their sake, that we could handle it in a simpler fashion, but that determination is in your hands. I'm not trying to ramrod anything
Yeah,
through.
no,
I'm
I,
just trying
I
to-
understand what you're saying, but
Simplify.
I think given the situation, given the fact that it didn't get built according to plan to begin with, given the fact that the original,
It decided they wanted to have the windows.
original advertisement was not truly accurate, and given the fact that we're doing all of this grading because we did something we shouldn't have done in the first place, says to me that you gotta have an amended order. You gotta get a new set of stamp plans for this and do an amended order. That would be my,
I agree.
Yeah, 100%.
I can't argue with that.
I would
I'm-
suggest that
know.
I'm just suggesting,
Oh, yeah.
but perhaps you'd like to withdraw this without prejudice, and then,
By all
talk to-
means, I'll put it back in the hands of BSC. and,
engineer, yeah.
to have it an amended order.
yeah. Okay,
All right.
is that what you'd like
I
to do?
understand. That's
All right.
fine, thank you.
Thank you for working it out for it with
Sure
us,
thing.
Phil, I appreciate it. No, you're just withdrawing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
Thank
could
you.
you just send something tomorrow, just an email to Brittany real quick
Gotcha.
saying
Very good.
you're withdrawing officially?
Excellent, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you, Phil. That did not go the direction I thought it was gonna go. All right,
Inspect the windows either.
moving on to our next order of business is continued notice of intent for SE 83-2392 Paul Mancuso BSE Group for Carl Valeri, 138 Kroll Road, proposed dredging and beach nourishment and land under the ocean, coastal beach, land containing shellfish and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Again, the applicant has requested to continue this to July 20th. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Next order is another continued notice of intent for SE 83-2393, Roy Okarowski for WRS Engineering for Jeffrey Cutter, 33 Prince Road, after the fact notice of intent filing for enforcement enforcement order for deck expansion, unpermitted patio, and 30-foot by 8-foot float and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Again, the representative is asking for a continuance to July 20th. I note this is the third request for that too, right?
Yeah, but we don't have that.
I know,
anymore.
I'm just
It's just a good note.
making a note.
Continued for any times.
Do I have a motion to continue to July 20th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chairman, just to refresh my memory, what was the determination we made about number of continuances?
They would be passed at this point, but we haven't officially adopted that yet, that policy, but I think we should be working toward that right now, so.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Next order of business is a new notice of intent for SE 83-2396 Dan Ojlik, Down Cape Engineering for Eleanor Atchison and Emily Hewitt, 170 Pleasant Street, proposed dock and float system in riverfront area, land under the ocean, coastal beach, salt marsh, land containing shellfish, fish runs, land subject to coastal storm flowage. Dan, do we have anything, we don't have a coastal bank on here?
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself from this hearing.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Bishop has recused himself from this hearing.
Good evening, Chairman Hoops, members of the commission. My name is Dan Ojala. I'm a civil engineer and land surveyor with Down Cape Engineering in Yarmouthport. Valerie Moore is counsel from Nutter for Ms. Atchison and Ms. Hewitt, who are in the audience behind us. I believe they have at least a member of the public in support who would like to say a few words at the end, but this is a pier which I think is best explained by a photograph, and this did get into the record a little bit late, so I just want to hand it out if I could, and then a photo of the nice wildflower meadow.
Got it up there in time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that aerial overview we'll come back to, but is a 1 inch equals 60 plot of a recent aerial view of the area, and just shows in a nice manner how much room, how broad the river is in this area, because we are asking for a wave run length, which is, I know, looked very carefully at on a case-by-case basis by this commission. And you can see the main channel traffic is here. The runaround Sioux sailboat, one of the closer moorings, is here. Another mooring is here. The boat traffic generally goes east of those, and north being up as you go up the river. I went through here myself. You can travel through this area, but it'd generally be a nice slow traffic pace. And there's, as you can see, a lot of room in there nonetheless. So this is a new pier ramp and float. L.D. Atchison is a longtime resident and her spouse of the area. They've been founding sponsors of many of the beneficiary groups along Bass River, and very respectful of the environment. Some of you may remember we redid the house. We very respectfully moved it back, maintained a beautiful tree that was in the yard, and did a very nice wildflower meadow. They've worked with Crawford Land Management on the waterfront with a soft solution. We did have to replenish some of the sand and redo some of the beach grass on the coir logs, but that's doing marvelously. The salt marsh apparently is doing better than it ever has. There's new species sprouting up and doing very well. So we're going to span over it lightly with a couple of piles here. And this is a fairly unique site because it's between two other piers, and those other piers, by necessity, are somewhat longer than your regulations allow. And this pier will be 11 feet back of those. In other words, the piers on either side are quite proud of it. And being in a wide area of the river, we feel it will not be a hazard to navigation. To that end, we did present to the Waterways Committee. They gave us, we were all in attendance, the attorney, I, and the owners, and had a nice discussion about things. They carefully looked at it. One of the things I would point out is that rock pile to the north. It's an ancient licensed stone pier, and we feel that it's very unique in this area. That it's artificially created a point there and some soft sediments on our side, which has made it a little bit shallower. And in this unique instance, we do feel that it would warrant an extension to the length rule of 80 feet and to get the 3 feet of water. We could obviously do an 80-foot pier, but the float wouldn't have sufficient depth for proper use. You always like to have a few feet under the boat to prevent prop dredging and/or disturbance of the sediments. I'll go through just quickly the pier regulations on a point-by-point basis. But again, the older SE was 83-2101 and 17, where we redid the cottage and moved it back and raised it up and did flood-resistant foundations and so forth. Resource areas: salt marsh, coastal beach, there's your bank, Ed, coastal bank, land containing shellfish, land under the ocean, fish run, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. And almost, quite of where we're working, almost the entire area is, of course, coastal storm flowage. We had BSC do a thorough shellfish report. That's enclosed as part of the package. And I'd point out that as you get further out, there's very few shellfish. So beyond the 80, we're not impacting that resource to any extent at all. But to the extent that we are, we're more than happy to donate $500 to the Seed Shellfish Fund in the town, just as a measure of goodwill. The pier ramp and floats were approved by the Waterways on April 10th. Again, we carefully looked at the mooring locations and at the length. And they did vote, I think there was unanimous with one abstention, that it was not a hazard to navigation. Again, and when you look at it from the aerial view, I think you can clearly see that the piers are fairly close on either side, 73 and 100, and they're both sticking out further than we are. So you'd be hard pressed to use this area, which is fairly shallow, which is why we need the length anyway. So it's not a great area for navigation, but we are putting nice big, 11.5-foot spans so you can get underneath it with a kayak. And little sailboats could still tack. They can turn on a dime if anyone was up in there. They would be able to manage nonetheless, because we have the proper separation distances within a foot or two. I won't go through the coastal bank except to mention that we are carefully maintaining that. LD's had Crawford Land Management pull out a lot of invasives and plant proper species, and it's doing very well, especially with the last maintenance that's been done. Coastal beach is a thin little margin of sand up there. It's some grasses. It's between the salt marsh and the toe of the coastal bank. It'll continue to respond to wave activity. Again, we're crossing it up with a 5 foot above mean high water, so you can walk right underneath it. And we'll be posting that for public passage per the Chapter 91 if the commission so sees to grant us a permit. The existing path, you can maybe see from the aerial that the pier just misses that. In order to center it a little bit and between the other two piers so it looks proper coming up the river, we did shift over to one side a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I think we're asking for a 5-foot variance to the new lot line, but the easterly abutter, who happens to be related, said absolutely no problem, so there's a letter in the file to that effect that does allow you folks to grant that variance, and we just think it, by symmetry, will look a little bit better along the river to have it the way we have it. So we'll just simply redo that grass path. We'll plant wildflowers and shrubs and just mow the vegetation where the center of the pier is to go. I would say there's 2 8-inch pilings in the area of the beach, so it's a very de minimis amount. It's 0.7 square foot of area. The pier will span the beach and coastal bank and initiate an upland grass area. The first 64 feet of the pier will be in the area of previous mitigation plantings in a natural area. This 64, we mean square foot impact, will be offset by infilling the entire existing grass path with like species as shown in the plan. And that's about 95 square foot, so maybe a little bit of a benefit there. To protect the salt marsh and lessen any impacts, the design of the pier includes piling spacing of a little over 13 feet in that area, a wider span over the salt marsh. There's a 4.5 square foot of salt marsh would be impacted by the 10-inch Greenheart pilings, the 8 of them that would be needed to go in that area. We like Greenheart because it's not CCA and it's a very long-lived pile. Wayne Kirker's had some for 40 years. They do wear out eventually, but they aren't. They don't have any copper in them, which is toxic somewhat to wild, to some species, arguably. And to that event, respect, if we are approved, we'll be very happy to donate. We found a wildlife fund that protects the Amazon at a very good rate. It's highly rated by the Bureau that rates these nonprofits, and we're happy to donate $500. I know it's not something that we have to do, but we're happy to do it to protect many, many, many acres of rainforest, which we feel will easily equal the small number of trees that we're utilizing for this particular pier. And that's a permanent restriction helping out the native peoples of the Amazon. The width of the decking is at 4 feet. The decking elevation will be 5 feet above the highest elevation of the salt marsh, and it'll have a 3/4 inch spacing. DMF does recommend always to go a little bit higher or a little bit narrower, but we've had good luck in this area. You can see from the photographs the north side of the piers, the shady side, it looks great. Underneath them, they get quite a bit of sunlight from the south, so it's the north side of on the west side of the river here that tends to be a little bit thin, but boy, they sure seem to be doing pretty well. So hopefully we can stick with that and not have to have an extra high section. The restored portion of the salt marsh is part of the prior notice of intent. So to be clear, we did enhance that salt marsh with Crawford Land Management. There were some new plantings, and it's been well maintained by the owners. Would argue the vertical surface of the piling serves as attachment areas for shellfish, spat, and barnacles. You know, it's almost like an artificial reef out there, especially when they're not CCA. You can certainly coat CCA or go with fiberglass piles. There are some other options, but, you know, natural wood should serve as a nice surface. Again, you get small impacts and maybe some small benefits. We feel the small area of impact will have no deleterious effect on the functions of the salt marsh ecosystem. And the narrative goes through that carefully. I won't read every sentence of that. We're crossing over lands containing shellfish. That's land in the ocean and is within a fish run. We indicate by our soundings with the proper adjustment that there will be 3 feet of water under the floats at mean level water. The 10-inch piles out there will be heavier duty. The last piles that hold the boat you tend to use a little bit bigger pile. So we've gone with the larger piles at the end. And they'll either be green hard or fiberglass. You jet them in a little bit and then drive them down to the proper 15 foot of penetration, or to 20 feet if you can get it. The driving down minimizes turbidity, and there shall be no grounding machinery or the barge at low tide. That's a standard condition that you guys impose, and we're happy to do that. I think DMF suggested not working within 2 hours of the low tide on either side to help maintain that, and we're happy to have that be a condition. The shellfish study was performed in 2021 by BSC under the Town of Yarmouth regulations. There was no significant shellfish population. Out of the 35 observed plots, only 20 quahogs were found. A small number of oysters and some rib mussels were observed in the marsh area that could easily be avoided during construction. The DEP does not map this as having eelgrass beds. Should shellfish be encountered, they'll be moved and replanted at the discretion of the Natural Resources Department. And again, we're very happy to contribute $500 to seeding. There's areas, perhaps this and others, that could use that as a little shot in the arm for the shellfish population. Minor turbidity from the pilings would have no effect on the fish run. Again, we'll watch our timing, but the current is expected to clear the water of any temporary impacts. We're here on the open river where there's a lot of activity, and driving will minimize versus jetting the sediment disturbances. By constructing it 5 feet over the salt marsh and the 3/4 inch spacing that's required, the salt grasses will continue to grow without deleterious impacts. Rare species were not listed in a priority or estimated habitat by the latest NHESP map, so we're clear on that account. So let me just go over the pier regulations. We seem to meet, in good quantity, the regulations, and the areas that we do not meet would like to go over carefully and have you consider as the do allow variances under your regulations on a case-by-case basis. And again, every site is unique. We're not setting any precedents here. There's very many unique features to each site, which I know you guys weigh carefully, and it's always a very careful decision. But on 4A, number 1, new piers to minimize the blocking of sunlight. Again, we're 3/4 inch spacing and lifting up. So no issues there. No impact to the mooring field. I think we're clear on this one. Again, we met with Waterways. The pier configuration was approved by the Waterways on April 10th, 2023. And again, I know their letter kind of backtracked a little from it, and we're happy to have a discussion with that and have their new head weigh in. Carl generally would write a letter in one way, and this was written in another, but we do have an email from them clarifying that he was comfortable with the language that I put into this narrative right here in front of you. And I did forward that to Brittany just so she has that for the permanent record. There'll be a minimal impact to the mooring field. Aerials from 06 to 08 indicate that the mooring field is not static. In 06, the nearest mooring was not even there. And today, last year, so 21 it was there, 22, and this year it's not there. So again, moorings are flexible. They pull them in, they put them back. It's a big river. And I think the one we were looking at was perhaps for beetle cat, which can go just about anywhere. So they didn't put it in, so I don't know that would need a variance, but you can see on the plan that there is one variance required, and that's over here. Where it was not 100 feet, it's only about 48 feet. But that could easily be moved out and respaced, and again, it apparently wasn't needed for the last couple of years, so. And the letter from Waterways stated that they'd maybe get a grid from ship shops on where they're gonna put them, so that they can have a little bit clearer understanding, but again, there's nothing there. We set the buoys out there. I drove by again in the boat and looked at it with the drone, and we're clear. There's one out here that's about 100 feet out towards the channel, and that's the closest one right now. So I don't think we need that variance unless Waterways clarifies that we do need a variance on that. But in any event, they voted that it was not a hazard of navigation very clearly, and to send it on to you folks. The language of that didn't specifically get in there, but again, I emailed Bill. I told him that, my sentence on this was, at the end of the narrative, that I was, the Yarmouth Waterway Committee voted that the proposed length was acceptable and was not a hazard of navigation at their April 10th, 23 meeting. He said, that looks fine, and replied back. We said, thank you, have a good weekend. And I did forward that to Brittany, just so she has that. I didn't touch on the moorings, but again, we were all there and had a careful discussion. We said, look, we'll work with them. If we don't have a particularly big boat, and we've got no problem with it being a little bit closer if they want to put it in there 1 year. And everybody was quite comfortable about the situation. Again, if it needs a little bit of clarification, we're happy to work with Waterways to provide that. Just to buzz through these other regulations, again, they're in the narrative, which I'm sure most of you have gone through, but just the pier shall not interfere with public recreational use is an important one, beside the mooring field. The pier area is not used, and what the sentence that does bring that up is very specific. It talks about tacking of sailboats in narrow areas of the river. In this particular case, the pier area is not used by tagging sailboats due to the presence of the existing moorings and piers. If there is a little tiny boat in there, they can wheel and deal around it in any event. But the sailing area is more active further south and east of the area. There's no commercial marinas, town docks, or swimming areas or landings impacts. There are some required setbacks to that, not applicable. Kayaks are seen readily paddling under or around the existing piers along the Bass River, kind of a nice little obstacle course for them. But anyway, public right of passage, number 4, a sign is proposed at the mean high water, informing their right to pass beneath the pier for alongshore access. 5 of your regulations, the base of the pier shall be as close as possible to the center line of the lot. Again, it's soft language. River frontage is about 105 feet. The floats will be 20 feet southerly of the north lot line projected, and about 62 feet from the southerly lot, so a little bit off-center, skewed to the north. The floats will be skewed a little bit more so that those look a little bit more centered even. Closer to the northerly lot line due to the fact that the recently rebuilt southerly pier is only 12 feet off the common lot line, and we didn't object at the time. It was recently rebuilt. And we just said, if you don't get any closer, that's okay, and that all went through. So we're skewed over by the neighbor, pushing a little bit, so we'd just like that, some relief on that to kind of center the pier along the other piers. Again, lot lines are imaginary things, piers are very real, and to have a nice even spacing, I think, is advantageous for everyone, just so that it looks normal. Soundings were performed under 6A, the project plans and specs. The soundings were performed for the locus. We do a careful job with the GPS and the rod, carefully measuring the bottom. The ends of the floats are more than 100 feet to the channel. There's a nice, big, deep, wide channel out there. There's no eelgrass in the area based on the DP mapping and visual inspection. Moorings are on the current data of June of 23. And then we did, there's one empty mooring about 100 feet, which, within 100 feet, and again, we went over this at some detail, but that mooring is within about 55 feet of another pier, so I don't know if it really belongs here anyway. But in any event, it's there on an intermittent basis, yes and no, 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 yes, no. But lately it hasn't been there, so we think that ship shops will probably just relocate it, or if they want to have a little bit closer, in a future year, we're not going to strongly object. It's we're all here to get along. So they could either relocate it or we'll take the relief if you deem it's necessary. Again, it's hard to get relief from something that's not there, but that's the hand we're dealt in this case. Construction would be by a barge with a crane, and again, care taken to not ground at low tide. We're happy to go to the 2 hours off low tide with the work. Cutting of debris includes sawdust to be done away from the resource areas that contain the scraps from entering the waterway. The pilings will be initially jetted and then driven to the 15-foot minimum embedment. Floating ramps would be stored in the contractor's yard off-season, not dragged up on the salt marsh. That's typical, obviously required, and that's how we would handle it. Those are best done by the professionals, and that's what we'll commit to. Soundings were March of '21 using a boat and instrument by Down Cape Engineering. We'll use NAVD 88 and then the site-specific data from the estuary tidal datum viewer. It's important to realize that NAVD 88 isn't mean low water datum. You have to adjust it down about 2 feet to get an accurate low tide. And that makes a big difference. If we didn't do that, we could have a short pier, but it would ground out at low tide because that isn't what the datum is. So it's important to understand that NAVD8 is basically a mean sea level datum. It's about halfway between the high and the low tide, 0. So you have to go down to the low tide, basically. So the contours that we're looking at out there, you say, gee, we've got minus 5, but that's really only -3. So that's why we have the 3 feet of water. You have to do that 2-foot adjustment. So there we are. A couple other ones, lights. The shellfish study by BSC with the guidelines. We talked about that. Very little habitat, and towards the end, no shellfish. Maybe one cherrystone. I don't think they even found any at the furthest transects. Lighting directed downwards and shielded. The pier is staked for viewing. You probably saw the 3 buoys. One is at the end, and the 2 are on the ends of the floats, and you can see that they're well back of those piers on either side. And the overlay here shows that as well, that it's not going to be a hazard of navigation as waterways found. Shared use is not available as an option. The abutters to either side have piers which are fully occupied, and Locust does not have any rights to either abutting pier. The big one then, 10, the length of the proposed fixed pier of the portion. You guys require 3 foot of water at the end and 80 feet to mean high water. In order to get our 3 foot without dredging to the end, we're 97 feet to the fixed pier, and with floats it's 125. That length is necessary, again, to attain the required 3 foot of water at mean low water at the end of the floats without dredging. On behalf of our clients, we're requesting a variance to allow the pier to be greater than 80 feet from mean high water due to the hardship conditions. The commission may, and I quote, at its discretion waive one or more of the regulations when the proposed work will not adversely affect any areas subject to the protection of these regulations, end quote. That's your section 401. There will be no adverse effect whatsoever to any areas subject to the protection of these regulations. As previously described, the pier is designed to allow significant sunlight or sufficient sunlight into the salt marsh, and disturbances will be de minimis. This pier, we would note, would be shorter than the immediately abutting piers by about 11 feet. In other words, when you strike a line between the ends of the abutting piers, don't count boats, either yes or no, but right between the licensed piers, we're 11 feet landward of that. I would say it's much better to maintain environmentally your 3 foot of depth than to construct a length-conforming pier, which could only be used at mid to high tide. Realistically, there wouldn't be much to prevent a motorboat from docking in less than 3 feet of water, which could lead to turbidity, prop dredging, and shellfish habitat disturbance. The variance is further warranted because a licensed stone jetty on the abutting property, and again, that's been there many, many years. It was shown as an old stone pier on a 1955 plan to the north. That kind of acts as a break, and we feel some sediments curl around that and settle and have infilled our area over the years. It's a very unique situation where you've got that stone jetty just upstream of us on a prominent point, And, you know, the 80-foot is kind of a one-size-fits-all. This is, you have to look at each site very uniquely. As you go up and down the river, there's bends in the river where you could have a 20-foot pier and get your 3 feet of water. Other areas like this, there's an extensive salt marsh and a sloping bottom, and we think that you can carefully look at this on a case-by-case basis and decide that in this particular unique situation, that waiver of the length is warranted. And Waterways agreed with us and did fully vote. Everyone that voted in favor, and thought that this would be a reasonable proposal. The applicants are willing to provide additional public benefit in the form of purchasing shellfish to benefit the public good. I would point again on the length, that maintaining the floats in 3 foot of water with a greater depth as one heads out. You know, you're not dredging and creating a funny little channel that you've got to follow in. You've got an easy sweep out into the deeper water. As one heads out to the channel, meets the intent of the regulations to minimize boat traffic impacts, there being not more detrimental to the public and/or shell fishery. Again, we're very willing to donate $500 to the shellfish to benefit the public good wherever the Department of Resources deems it lacking. Again, we don't want there to be a quid pro quo on this or anything like that, but we're just saying that that's, you know, it's a very reasonable thing for us to do, considering we are impacting a little bit of shellfish area. Accordingly, the proposed project meets the criteria for the commission to vary the length of the pier requirement. And again, we're going over exactly this very unique situation with the old licensed stone pier, the weird promenade, the 2 piers on either side which are out, the kind of compact nature of this, the extreme width of the channel. We're not right next to a marina. We're not right next to a beach. It's a very unique area. Some of the other ones that we're looking at, and again, the Yarmouth Waterways Committee voted that the proposed length was acceptable and was not a hazard to navigation at the April 10th, 2023 meeting. I highlighted that section, sent it to Bill. He said, looks great. And we said, thank you, have a good weekend. And I did forward that email over. So that was the intent of their vote. And we were all at the meeting in person. Number 11, it's not a pier expansion, so that regulation doesn't count. On 12A, there is a variance of 2 feet, kind of de minimis. But the southerly abutter there should be 75 by your regulations. We're 73 currently. If you could find it in yourselves to grant us 2 feet, we sure would appreciate it. Again, we're trying to center these without getting too close to the lot line. Outermost floats are more than 100 feet to the channel, absolutely meet that. Greater than 200 feet from a boat ramp, public landing, swimming beach, yes, we do meet that. No, not applicable. New pier will be 20 feet from, so another one for a variance to keep our eye on is 12D, 20 feet from the projected lot line. But again, we've got a letter of permission from the abutter on that small variance. The floats are proposed at 199, which is a 200-foot maximum, again, for these waterfront homes. That we think that's a reasonable number, and we're hopeful that you could allow us just shy of your maximum. Green Heart, it's not an expansion of an existing dock, so 14 doesn't apply. 15, we will very likely use Green Heart piles, but we could be convinced to use perhaps fiberglass if needed. There's a 16s requirement that we're not in a no dock zone. We examined the maps. We're clear. There are docks allowed in the zone according to your mapping system, so we're clear on number 16. And then the last 3 are, it's not a public project, an existing dock or an existing dock. So those last 3 do not apply. But that would be our ask on this. Again, it's a very unique situation. You can see from the aerial view that there's a tremendous amount of river out from us. The moorings are not particularly close. There is one other mooring that doesn't have a boat on it that's about 100 feet straight off our pier. But again, they line up very nicely down the river. Everybody goes on the outside of them, and no one really travels in that area as a practical matter. But if they do, they're welcome to. And again, we're 11 feet back of the piers on either side. This allows us to get that water depth that's critical for the ladies to be able to get in and out of there without grounding and hurting the shellfish. And we think in this one unique place, this is a very reasonable request for those variances. And I'd be glad to answer any questions if you do have them. I think we might have had someone to speak in support, if, when,
I'll get
if
to
and
it,
when.
yeah. Well, first of all, absolutely beautiful. I love it. Okay, that has nothing to do with the project at hand, but I did want to say that this is. I mean, this was actually what I hope to see when we ask people to do planting. So,
The model.
well done, well done. With that said, I'm just going to go out and say right now, you made many valid points. We have granted variances for a lot of different things over the years and a lot of different portions of the dock and pier bylaw. The one thing that I cannot ever recall in the 24 years that I've been on the board is the length of a pier. And I don't know, this is really difficult for me. So I guess I'm going to work through a little thing. I mean, we have, like I said, we have never issued a variance for length. That's the one thing that we've always maintained.
Yep.
We've just never done it. So what you're asking is a lot for us. I'm just going to try and give you a little bit of background on that one.
Yeah, I certainly understand that, and the applicant understands that. I'd remind the commission that that was a number that was set. I think Brad Hall mentioned we copied it from the Chatham regulations. It's a number, and I'd really have you guys think hard whether it makes sense to just apply a one-size-fits-all to every single site along the river. You go across the way, this would be allowed as of right on a symmetrical across the river in Dennis. They wouldn't have a problem with it. It's the same body of water. And in this instance, with the licensed stone pier sticking out and causing us some shallow water, a big, extensive, healthy salt marsh that would help nourish through your guidance, pushing us out. There's some pretty unique factors on this particular site that I think could lead us to find a non-precedent-setting, reasonable variance.
I get it. What kind of boat are you putting on the dock here? Do we have a vessel in mind, or do we have one that you already own that you're planning on designing the pier for?
Yeah, there's a.
Here, you could speak into the.
Sorry. 16-and-a-half-foot Nantucket skiff, and we have a 18-foot Marshall Sandpiper, and possibly other boats of that dimension. We're not thinking about anything.
15 to 18 foot, then
Yeah.
roughly.
Right.
Okay. So we're talking about drafts here that are in the foot to foot and a half range, right? So if we cut it back to 80 feet, okay, if we have the fixed portion of the pier back to 80 feet, you're looking at a sounding of 1.5 feet. Is that right, Dan?
For the quick math, you have to take 2 feet off, roughly 2.2 to be precise, but about 2 feet off those contours.
Now, you have the sounding
So
at
at
3.
5, we're 3.
So you take 2, that would be 1, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So not,
Okay.
And that's at an average low tide. There can be, lunar cycles where you'd be just about on the ground there.
And that's the 1.5 foot draft. If you're using a 1.5 foot draft, that's with motor down.
Yeah, and there's sailors, and some of the smaller sailboats don't have motors, but fair enough, yeah.
I'm going to go to the rest of the board for now, and I'll see what they have to say first, and then come back. So anybody else on the board with questions or concerns, comments?
Well, one picture that Brittany has there shows the mooring that's very close to them. That does not show in the aerial because it was taken too early in the season.
Oops, sorry.
Right there. Well, go back one. That one would be, if you look at the markings there, that would be disrupted or moved somewhere, and but we don't look at the moorings and how they move them, and quite honestly, getting a mooring moved or a mooring anywhere on Bass River is very hard to do. So I don't know what they're gonna do with that one. I also have an issue with the 80 feet. We're gonna start creeping out, and it's gonna be one of those things that once we start, where do you draw the line?
Well, there aren't too many piers left on the river, honestly. You know, most of the places have them, you know.
I can think
Down
of
this
3
end.
that are coming up that are gonna be over 80 feet, so.
Yeah, requesting, yeah. But again, you know, you have to look on a case, you know, not to interject, but in a case-by-case basis, and boy, you know, if there was anything crying out for a variance to get that water depth, this does seem to be the one where you've got the rock pile, the license 2756 there, that obviously has some effect on the water levels. You've got no objection from any abutters. You've got a supportive abutters, actually. You know, it's a, once it's in, it'll nestle right in there and be not obtrusive to anyone, I strongly feel.
I have a question for you. Do you know how long the docks are on either side, the piers on either side of the proposed pier?
So we got about, round figures, 140 to the south, and that's off mean high water.
But those are all pre-existing,
Yeah, they are. They've been there a while, and we just rebuilt them
and
both.
135 on the other one.
About 155 from mean high, 125, I guess.
All right, and also you mentioned the moorings, and you mentioned ship shop. Does the town set the moorings, or does ship shop set the
So it does vary, but I think Ship Shop's responsible for the ones in this area, working through the harbor master's office, but they have the crane and the boat and the clients, and that's how they arrange things.
I see, okay, all right, thank you.
I have nothing at this point.
Okay. And this isn't for this discussion, but I don't quite understand why the commission has issues with moorings or anything else, and distances and setbacks from moorings, because it's really not, I don't understand why I've never understood why we've had that in the bylaw, so I really don't have an issue with that sort of thing. I don't have an issue with the 20 foot, 25 is what the state usually asks for, 25 minimum off the property line.
Unless the neighbor gives a letter, yeah, so.
You know, I don't have an issue with that.
And the building commissioner, believe it or not, will enforce a 20-foot setback anyway, so, you know, we would.
So, what it comes down to, I think the real crux for me is, number one, the overall length. What type of boat is gonna be used on it in this case, because that certainly can play into what I'd be willing to look at or entertain. And then something not germane to the length of the project, but the height of the boardwalk or the pier over the salt marsh. I would like to see that, and I believe Natural Heritage goes to they ask for a 1.5 to 1 ratio, so I would ask that as well, but it still comes down to it's just this matter of the length, the overall length.
Can I ask what the concern is with the length? Because the standard for a variance in your regulations is pretty clear as to whether it has an adverse impact on the areas of protection subject to the bylaw. And I think we've walked through pretty carefully that there's no adverse impact to any of the wetland resources from this. And your bylaw is pretty specific about what it means when it talks about recreation, which is, as far as I can tell, the only discernible concern that could be there with respect to length. And, we walked through this, but it's not an area used by sailboats tacking through a narrow waterway. It's not an area used by boaters or others because of unique wind or current conditions. The structure wouldn't interfere with public access to or from a way to water, nor would it impact town beaches and swimming areas. So the bylaw is pretty clear about what those recreational interests are that are protected, and it doesn't seem that this length variance would interfere with that, in part because the unique condition of the site means that this pier is tucked pretty far back relative to the other piers surrounding it. So a sailor would have to work pretty far out of their way to get into a situation where they were in conflict with that pier. So it seems here there's pretty clear room in the regulations to waive it. So it'd be helpful for us to understand what the concern is that, we need to address with respect to the length.
So again, I think it comes down to a lot to precedent. I mean, we've just never, we have never, ever, ever gone beyond the 80 foot. And we have turned people down recently for the same reason.
I would also say that every single dock and pier have an adverse impact on the wetland resource areas. They're not avoidable. They're only able to be reduced slightly with best management practices. But the longer the pier or dock is, the more adverse impact there is on the ecosystem, the land under the ocean, the land containing shellfish. It changes the habitat from open water to highly shaded, and that changes a lot of things. It can change the water chemistry. It can change the habitat available for subaquatic vegetation, for the salt marsh especially. There are ways you can reduce that impact, but there will always be impact. And I think that's part why we have the length requirement. We don't want to exceed the necessary amount of impact. And if there's an area on the river that doesn't meet that depth within 80 feet, it's just not suitable for a dock under our regulations.
Well, to echo on that, though, I mean, almost all these resources would be impacted by an 80-foot pier. And then further out, there's no shellfish, there's no eelgrass, so it's almost like an inert area, an aquatic desert out there. We're putting in an artificial reef, some nice piles for things to spat to habitat, fairly minimal shading. Again, if eelgrass beds were in the area, it would certainly be, that float would be, a big concern, but there isn't. And, sometimes shellfish do better under piers because people don't get under there, and you get some nice big breeding shellfish that, are safe from human predators. But, so we do hear you. There's always some, we'd argue that it, some comes back. And I think one thing that we could agree to right away would be probably could we reduce the width of the walkway to 3 feet over the pier where the walkway we're over the salt marsh, and then go back to 4 feet, because that would then give you the proper height. It'd be a little bit less shading in that area, and rather than have a funny looking camelback, would be a little bit narrower.
It's either narrow
a little bit
or
narrower,
raise it.
and then wide it back out.
That's up to you.
So we could certainly look at that. And again, if there was shellfish out here, I would say, yeah, that's, but in a barren area, and again, we're very happy to donate, at least $500 towards getting some more shellfish on this river. But to put that out in an area where there's not hardly any shellfish, maybe one or two, and of course would check before we put the piles in anyway to relocate them. So, while there is certainly some measurable impacts, it's very, very minimal, and that last little bit that goes out is hardly anything. And it gets us to 3 feet. If they would like a little bit bigger boat later, would have the ability, and there wouldn't be, concerns about somebody else coming in later and mucking up with a bigger boat, that the ladies have a smaller sailboat, but someone later may have a bigger boat, and now we've set up a problem. So it seems to me in this unique situation, and given that it's a fairly arbitrary number. Again, it was taken, it's my understanding, from another town, and yes, you've held to it, but I think it makes sense in a lot of places. But in this unique situation, under this particular set of circumstances, with a licensed rock pile, with the two piers proud of it, and the big salt marsh and in the shallow, it seems to be a good opportunity to exercise some discretion, which is allowed by the bylaw.
Can I ask how you arrived at 127 feet between the 80 and the 127? Is there another, in other words, could it be shorter than 127 and more than 80?
Well, the way that we did it is we just took the float out until we hit the 3 feet of water, and that was the length that was required, because otherwise we would need a variance. It's sort of the lesser of two evils, you know. We feel that by having that float out there, especially when the piers on either side of us are proud of us, that 3 foot of water depth is just nice to have. It'll allow us to glide right in under sail, anchor up, not have to, you know, get squirrely right next to shore and perhaps run aground.
So at what point does it become 3 feet after the 80?
At 127.
The
127,
125.
okay.
We've made it as short as we can,
Okay.
honestly, yeah.
And I sat and listened to somebody mentioned on this, I think it was Ed, about how decisions were made based on the 80 feet. And, you know, thinking about it tonight, it seems to me, you said something I think that's important, Dan, and that is a one-size-fits-all kind of a situation. To be sensitive to the environment and to be sensitive to the contours of the river and everything else, I think it might be wise for us to think about, in the future, not a one-size-fit-all kind of a application of these regulations. If there is room for variances, and this seems very, very well thought out, and I know it might fly in the face of some other decisions that were made, but I haven't been on this board for 20-something years, you know, and it's a big learning curve, understanding the regulations and so on. So to me, right now, you know, and I might not make many friends on the commission, I don't see the harm of this kind of proposal. I think it's, as I said, a well-thought-out thing, and maybe something that should be done a little bit more in terms of looking at the areas and seeing a well-thought-out proposal with all of the characteristics of it, and saying, okay, this is the best way to do a pier in this particular area. And it might exceed the 80, it might be less than 80, but again, it's being sensitive to the particular characteristics of that piece of property. So, you know, I don't know if I have any others on the commission who agree with me, but that, after this very nice proposal, I think I don't see any harm of it.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, that's not the only variance they're asking for, is also the 73 feet off the dock to the south of it. And yes, they did get approval by the next-door neighbor for the lot line. So it's not just the 80 feet that,
Well, we could certainly take 2 feet off the floats if that was a deal breaker, you know, that would be very, very quick to do that, if that would help your decision. It's kind of it's just a unique little site, you know, and there's got great stewards of the river. They've got strong support from great stewards of the river that are just upstream of us. And boy, it sure cries out for some relief in this one unique case, I think.
So just to be clear for myself, the two variances you're asking for is the 2 feet, and you would handle that?
But take a foot off each float if we get your vote, that would be
And
no
then the
problem.
80 feet to the 127, or whatever it is. Yeah, 127. Those are the two variances.
Yeah,
There's 4 variances.
and the mooring,
The mooring is 48 feet. It is in our regulations, but
Yeah.
yeah, instead of 100 feet, there's a 48-foot mooring and the property line distance, but we have agreeing from the abutter, but that's still a variance.
I think it's the overall length, because it's like 50 feet over.
Yeah, it's 47 feet
It's quite-
longer.
Yeah.
I also just had some concerns about the area where the dock is going to meet.
We'll get to you,
The
okay?
land? We won't forget you. This is not just something you could mow through. There's like 7 feet tall beech plum in here, bayberry, roses, some sweet fern, and bearberry. It's very well established. And it's really stabilizing the bank on that side. And I would be definitely concerned about getting rid of all that vegetation for the path for the new dock.
Well, the path should only be 4 feet though, right? At most.
Yeah, there was only one stake, so I wasn't sure if that was the end, the far end, or the close end of the proposed path,
Yeah, it's.
or the middle.
That's
There-
actually left over from something else, I think.
Well, no, I was out there myself. You're right, it's very healthy vegetation. They've done a great job with it, but there is another stake a little bit landward of that, which was the first stake, and you can line through them where the path was. So there was another stake. You had to kind of push down some leaves to see it, so.
Yeah, I saw the one further toward the house, but was
Yes.
this the middle of the path?
So that was the path, and this is the end of the pier. Yeah. And that's where it just launches off the ground. So we'd be very happy to transplant that. If it was, you feel strongly about it and the whole commission, we could swing the pier a little bit to hit the existing path. It would just put it at a tiny bit of an angle, but that was our hope to leave it. You can see there's some lower brush there, maybe we could kind of split the difference. And a lot of that was all just recently maintained and enhanced by the redevelopment of the property. So we'd be happy to work with you on that landing area.
Oops,
Oh, you can put that back.
I don't think I have any other
I mean,
pictures.
I would say if you could move it, that would be the better thing to do.
Yeah.
But if you can't move it and you're insistent on doing it that way, then I would feel that you would have to heavily revegetate that.
Yeah, with the similar shrubs, not just wild, more.
Yeah, within similar, with the, I mean, that's what I'd want to see, you know, except for the path that's coming through. And so you might consider having the 3 foot running all the way through, you know, reducing the width all the way through that. If that's the way you gotta go. If you can move it, that's the way I'd like to see it. You know, just because you're not impacting as much then that way, right?
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah, we're not too far off that existing path, you're right.
You're what, 4 feet?
Yeah,
6 feet off?
yeah, it's not very far. And
Or for that matter, you could, I mean, I'm not here to design, I'm not here to design your project here, but you could, there's nothing saying a pier has to be 150 feet of straight boards and going all the way down. You can
Connect, yeah, just do the angle.
angle things, so the majority of it is still straight, but you just have a little jog coming over to that path. So I think that's, because that way you're still keeping that path, you
Yeah.
could reduce it, you're keeping the path that's already there, and you're not doing any more damage to the vegetation on the bank or the buffer to the bank.
You won't need to plant anything.
Hmm?
And you won't need to revegetate anything.
And you won't, I mean, and we don't have to keep on going back to make sure that the vegetation
Is
takes,
alive.
which is a big plus.
I think we could probably work with you on that, you know, we'd probably move the pier a little bit and just the very end of the path, you know, maybe one bush or something like that, and make it all work very well, if anything.
Brittany, anything else?
That was all of my comments.
Okay, anybody in the audience? I think there's at least one person, right?
Yes, I know, that's my beautiful cat boat that you see.
Excuse me, can
close
you
to
give
me.
us your name?
Oh, Mark Anschutz.
I'm sorry, what?
Mark Anschutz.
Thank you.
That cat boat is mine, and I'm happy to have it moved anywhere. Actually, this year, Ship Shops put it closer to what we're talking about. It should be closer up toward the mouth and more away from the proposed pier. So that's, my boat is the closest into all of this thing, and it can be moved all sorts of ways. Normally, it's beyond and out of the way of what you propose. And I just have to, I've been a neighbor for 38 years, and these people are Bayberry freaks, and that waterfront, I mean, don't worry about, they're making a earnest effort to maintain the environment along the river. You're not going to find anybody who does more or is more willing to accommodate that. And 38 years, I can attest to it.
Okay, thank you very much for your, those comments are,
Full.
we truly appreciate those. Anybody else in the audience? Anybody on Zoom? Raise your hand digitally.
Don't see anybody.
I see none. Is there any further discussion among the board?
I will say that I'm tending to agree with Paul that sometimes variances exist because there are things that happen, you know? And I would tend to agree with Paul, and I would vote to approve this, but I don't know what happens if it's a 2-2 vote.
Does not pass.
Does not pass, so.
Are you willing to make all those other changes we've been talking about? Moving the start of the dock back to the existing path? Narrowing it from that point all the way across the marsh?
3 feet across the marsh, move the start of the dock to the center of the, or to the edge, at least so we can get on it from the existing grass path. And
Knocking 2 feet
2
off
feet off,
the,
2 feet off, 1 foot off each float. Yes,
Hopefully
we
someday
absolutely can commit to that.
moving the mooring, but that's not,
It's pretty mobile anyway,
that's
but yeah,
not that
we'll
big a
work
deal.
with them on it, and they're all friends, so there won't be any battles.
it'll be different next year when you try and do it anyhow, right?
Yeah, always is, something changes on the river.
So in essence, we're voting for something with one variance, because the other variances have been agreed to and all the neighbors have agreed to it.
Well, but they're variances, but
So-
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
You
mean.
would still,
Right,
There's still 3 that you would be voting for.
I understand.
yeah.
One controversial, 2 not so much.
Yes.
Okay, so so if you're willing to do that with a revised plan showing those changes, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the project with special conditions and subject to receipt of a revised plan showing the change in the beginning of the pier,
So moved.
narrowing to 3 foot
Sorry.
over the marsh, and from the top of bank to across the marsh, and removing 2 feet from the overall length of the floats. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
1.
Well, we certainly appreciate your very careful consideration in this very unique place. Thank you for your time.
You're gonna come back and protect us when we get sued from 5 other people, right?
Yeah.
Every site is unique. The Waterways said that too. Every site is unique. It's its own little castle, and you defend it as needed.
That's the issue that I have, is people coming back with the 80 feet. It's gonna open a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, this is a very, very unique situation.
They're all unique. They're all unique.
That's exactly the point.
Oh, and that's also incorporating DEP and it's mostly natural marine fisheries. That's
Comments,
the
yeah.
salt, yeah.
Thank you.
Ed, you voted aye?
I did, yes. It's 3 to 1.
Right.
Oops, add this too. Goes into the folder.
Add that to that folder. Another choice.
3 to 1 does not pass, right?
I don't want those.
Does not pass, right?
You don't want these for the folder?
No, I don't want those. Oh, I guess I can.
We only had 4 people.
I thought it had to be a quorum of the commission.
There's a quorum for 4.
There's a quorum for 4.
Okay,
4 is a quorum.
but only 3 people voted yes. Yeah.
I think that's gonna open a whole ball of wax that we're not gonna want at West Sea.
But if there was 4 sitting here present, you needed all 4 votes for it to pass.
But you can't because we only had
We danced around that one, didn't we?
for now.
You needed a majority of the whole board to pass a project.
Wouldn't 4 be a majority? 3 of the,
4, not 3. Because we,
3 would be the majority of the 5 that were here.
but I thought it wasn't of the ones that were here. I thought it was of the total seats on the commission.
The only person missing was Pat. We only have 5 members of the commission now, right?
We only have 6 members.
6.
5 of us were present. So
Last
even if-
meeting there, we only had 4 people. You let them know that they needed everyone to vote yes in order for it to pass. Okay.
I don't think we have to do it, because, I mean, we only got 5 people present, so even if Rick voted no, we would have still had 3 to 2, and it would have passed,
Correct.
Okay.
right?
I don't know, I gotta make sure.
Okay. We're really gonna have a huge discussion about peers.
Yeah.
Next order of business, another new notice of intent, this SE 83-2397, Roy Okarowski, WRS Engineering for Paul and Nancy Cruz, 52 Prince Road, proposed dock and boat lift and land under ocean, coastal beach, salt marsh, land containing shellfish, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The applicant has requested a continuance to July 20th. Is there a motion to that effect?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Oh, you know what? I need that file because I voted no, I shouldn't have signed that. I shouldn't have signed that.
One line.
Well, that's not really my signature either.
Ellie signed the signature page.
She didn't have to, but.
This one's gonna be interesting next time.
Let's see, request for a certificate of compliance. So we have 2 certificates of compliance. Both are in order, so do I have a motion? Sorry. Request for a certificate of compliance for SE 83-1297, 18 Channel Point Drive, and one for SE 83-1623, 29 Valley Road. All things are in order. Do I have a motion to issue the certificates of compliance for SE 83-1297, 18 Channel Point Drive, and for SE 83-1623, 29 Valley Road?
So moved.
All those, sorry, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Moving on to enforcement, we have, how are we fixed on Zero Great Island Road now?
You all received a restoration plan in your packet.
And what?
You all got a restoration plan in your packet.
I did not see that, so I'm sorry.
I didn't either.
Yeah, we did get a
Looks like that.
restoration.
This here? This is this
Hand-drawn.
hand-drawn thing?
Hand drawn.
Then I did get it.
All right, did anybody have any comments on it? Hello? Okay. Anybody comments? Brittany, any comments?
I think it's fine. We can have an on-site meeting before they plant it. They increased the number of plantings significantly from last time I looked at it, when it was not significant enough.
Okay, if you're good with it, I'm good with it. Any further discussion?
Do we have a monitoring time?
It'll have to be 3 years.
Years.
Should be 3 years
Yeah,
And when are they planting?
in the fall.
September,
Well, the beach grass will go in the,
in March.
March. But the rest of it can go in the fall. Okay, and you'll discuss all the special conditions that, for planting and everything with them at the site visit, right?
I have a question. Mr.
Sure.
Chairman.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and I'm not sure if it is the groin shown on this plan, but there's one of the groins where the material has completely eroded away to within, 40 feet of the road, and this seems to be back pretty significantly.
Yeah, that's not included in this.
Okay, it's a different one?
That was the
portion of
part
plan.
that broke out after that they weren't expecting to break
Okay.
out. That's not.
Thank
So
you.
that part, they're just gonna put beach grass.
Further west.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So from this groin, all of this side is going to be planted with the vegetation and shrubs, and all on this side, they're just going to do beach grass.
Thank you.
That's what their proposal is.
Now I understand.
And if we're on site in September and if it looks too dense, we can ask them to bump some over to the larger side.
Okay.
They just said it was too skinny for 3-gallon plantings on that side.
And that's our problem?
All right, so we don't have a date on this, do we?
Is there not a date on it? I can look in my email for when he submitted it.
Okay, so I'll make this the plan of record.
Okay.
You're taking my,
You're not well enough for a beer.
Do we have our stamp?
Do.
You're right.
We keeping him up?
Apparently.
I was gonna say, who's,
someone behind you.
all right, we approved that, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did we vote?
No, we did not vote
We
yet.
did not vote.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought we
Excuse me.
did.
I
Okay,
did too.
so all those in favor of Vic,
No, we haven't had a.
Make a motion.
didn't I just ask for, oh, man, I must
You
be,
did.
I must be having it in
No,
my,
he did
I'm
not.
having wonderful conversations in my mind. Thank you
That
very
was
much.
a COC.
Just as long as you're not arguing with
Right here
yourself.
for you.
No, I was, yeah, I already had everything taken care of. So do I have a motion to accept the restoration plan, which I'll accept for, I'll call it for today's date, but
So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
There you go. Now you-
Follow our leader, just without question, you know.
Hold it in.
Oops, you know what I forgot to do?
COCs?
I'm just catching my paperwork up here. Hold on for a second.
Oh, those are dangerous.
What's that?
Gives me
Those are
time to
dangerous.
get-
Yeah, dangerous. I bought this a long time ago. They're really good. Oh.
There you go. Further enforcement, 59 Oyster Cove Road floating dock without wetlands permitting.
You two have to sign the second one.
Second, which one is this?
The one we talked about on the
These are
phone.
both the COCs, and you only signed the first one.
Oops, sorry.
How long has that been?
I think it just must happen because I was just,
Okay,
I've been
moving
moving this
the-
back and forth here, so.
It's on it.
Yeah.
Did Ed sign it?
Brittany, you want to give us a rundown?
Sure. There is a dock on an easement on the parcel of land, 59 Oyster Cove Road. It has an interim approval from DEP Waterways, and it has had that since 1994, was when it was issued. The property transferred hands last November. In the interim approval, the new owner has 1 year under that permit. So the DEP Waterways interim approval expires this coming November. There is no record of this going through any wetlands permitting, DEP wetlands or local. It has this small section of stairs and a very small pier, but the rest of it is a floating dock. It has been deployed every year for the past 25 years, but it does sit on the bottom at low tide for the most of the floating dock. I have never seen it before, so obviously it's been being deployed for a very long time, but I have not seen it. So I did, when they were deploying it, I asked the people deploying the floats to remove them, and I gave them an enforcement order to remove the floats. and brought us here to discuss the history of this parcel and what to do moving forward.
And this is on the easement.
This is on an easement on 59 Oyster Cove Road. But the interim approval is under the name of the homeowners at 29 Oyster Cove Road up the street.
And this is, but the easement is on 59.
The easement is on 59.
Okay, and so we have no record, there's no legal record or anything that gives, well, we had no wetlands permitting whatsoever.
Correct.
And so we have no permission granted by the
I
owner of
don't,
the property.
it is currently unclear.
The staircase?
The
That leads
staircase is
to
on the
the-
easement too?
on the easement?
Yes,
Part of it, right?
correct.
Okay, well, I don't think that you had any choice other than to issue an enforcement order to remove it. And you could try and, I guess you could try and seek permitting. But in order for that to happen, then you would also have to have,
The ownership,
is it the same person the person who has the 91 waterways permit is the same person who is still using it today?
well, the property was bought last November by a new homeowner.
The 59 was bought by a new
No,
homeowner.
sorry, 29, the one that has the,
Okay, they're the ones who
have the interim
waterways, okay.
approval, yes. But the owner of 59 has been the same for however many years.
Well, so the person at 59 is now saying they don't want this on their property?
That's
Is it-
correct. They have sent a letter to DEP Waterways saying they don't want to approve a new filing there. But DEP Waterways has told them they haven't received a new filing yet. They only have the old one.
59 and 29 Oyster Cove, right?
Yes.
Yes. Did I miss anything?
We can elaborate.
Yep.
Paul may have something to say, because I've got some things I wanted to explain.
Okay. Why don't we start out, Bob and I will introduce ourselves.
Focus, okay? Focus.
Narrow,
Straight,
very narrow box
straight
here.
down,
Not
give me the
worried.
facts, okay? Give me the facts.
Okay. We're here representing,
Could you start with your name, please?
yes, sorry. Chairman Hoops, I know very well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all. I'm Paul Revere. I'm here with Bob Perry, who I'm sure you all know. I'm an attorney. We represent Rosangela Caliero, who purchased 29 Oyster Cove Roads from the Bates family in November of last year and began looking at the process of applying for a Chapter 91 license. She has an incomplete application in and was working on completing the application, having BSC do a plan for the area, and BSC asked her to deploy the dock so they could put the dock as it was on the plan. The Bates have owned the property from 1980 to 2022. They obtained an interim approval for that. No one has found any recorded approval, nor the exact date when the dock was originally placed in some of the structures, but it does have an interim approval, which gives some background. I'm going to turn it over to Bob because you don't want to hear a lawyer talk, so. Bob,
Okay.
you're up.
Thank you. Bob Perry, Cape Cod Engineering. And BSC was hired to do a perimeter survey to mark out the easement. That was the deal on that. And when I found that out, I
Bob,
advised,
sorry, so we're talking about currently,
I
right?
understand, I just
I'm saying
advised
we're
the
talking
owner.
BSC was hired currently to do the.
We wanted to get the dock on a plan, so that was, as every year, the property owner who has the interim DEP approval was going to deploy the dock. And Brittany explained to you, she issued the enforcement order, here we are. So I just wanted to focus on two things, because this structure was deployed for 3 decades. When interim approvals were gained,
there was usually some acknowledgement of the local conservation process, and many, many structures predate orders of conditions, and we're not even going to talk about that. But an honest effort was made by everyone involved to maintain the facility. Yes, the floats are on the bottom. It's an antiquated system. And as we go through our process, we like to improve on those circumstances. I think the inshore floats are on the bottom at low tide. The means of attaching the floats are pipe pilings. And just to give you some perspective, every dock, or I should say 90% of the docks in Harwich, Chatham, and Orleans are all seasonal docks. It's preferred that docks can remain out of the system for, say, 9 or 8 months out of the year. And pilings are typically either pipes or wooden posts that are put in routinely and taken out. So there's not a large environmental negative to this. And the applicant, the enforcement order recipient, is seeking to get the commission's authority to put this facility back in the river for the season, with the provision that she will initiate an application, a notice of intent, to make what improvements that we can see that are viable that the commission might accept, such as a pile-supported pier where the floats are on the bottom, and then getting out into the Commonwealth tidelands, a ramp and a typical small-size float, which is what is there today. DEP licensing doesn't necessarily differentiate between a floating dock that goes out or a pile-supported pier that goes out. It's a projection in the waterway. They prefer the pile-supported, as you would too. And so I did want to remind you that I have a case that's pretty recent, 2020, all under your 2016 regulations, where a dock in Yarmouth that had a license for a dock that was very small, that had been expanded with floats that were on the bottom over by Grandview area off High Bank. And the license was actually voided because the facility had been enlarged not legally. And the Yarmouth Conservation Commission, in reviewing this facility, allowed for a pile-supported pier to take the place of the floats and allowed an enlargement of the facility.
Bob, but that had a previous wetlands permitting, is that right?
There was an order of conditions for a dock.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all, I was just.
It's a minor difference, but it's one of those cases. So the interesting part about that, and again, I don't want to get off track, is that they showed 4 feet of water at the end of the float. Over there, when I was there measuring it, it was about 1 foot. So we don't know quite what went on there, but I'm trying to point out a similarity that we have a new owner who acquired some property, and Paul Revere can go into the concept of ownership. Anyone with an easement is a person with interest in property, and therefore DEP defines as an owner. We're not going there either, just wanted to mention it. So that the understanding is here, if the applicant can secure whatever legal authority they need to file the notice of intent, would the commission look at the last 30 years of deployment of that facility? And like any dock in the river, you've been enforcing on inconsistent facilities. I know that. I've received some of the letters. And all of them that I dealt with were rendered in non-compliance because they were inconsistent with their Chapter 91 permits. There were docks that had no orders of conditions because they were old. And so that here we have a similar case. We don't have an order of conditions. We do have a DE permit, and the applicant is seeking 2 questions here tonight. Will the commission support the redeployment of the facility for the summer of 2023, say with the date certain for removal, with the provision that there will be an application, provided an application can be made,
to put forward a facility that will not have 3 feet of water. We don't want to go any longer or any significant distance longer than we have, possibly a little longer, but a more traditional pier structure that would remove these floats from the bottom. Remember, this has been in service, unopposed, unregulated, unenforced for 30 years. And we're not asking you to approve that. We're asking you if that is a legitimate approach for this commission to review, given this rather incredibly special and unique set of circumstances. So that's the short story. If I can make it short like that, what do you think?
I'm going to give you my short answer, okay? I'm going to say, personally, it comes down to the fact that the person who owns the easement upon which this new homeowner wants to put a dock, regardless of how many times that's been going in and out, the homeowner that owns the easement doesn't want to give permission to do that. Now, you asked the question, would I support it going back in for the summer? No, I would not, because it doesn't have any kind of permitting with conservation previously, and so the fact that they're putting it in currently, newly today, this past week, I would view that as a new, it's essential. I mean, I realize they've been doing it for 29 years, but that may be the case, but it's been out, and it was in the process of being put in again very recently this year, and so I would say that is a new violation that has occurred, and I would say no, we wouldn't support allowing a violation to occur or to knowingly be installed, and in fact that's why we stopped it. And that's regardless of whether or not they promise to take it out and apply for a new permit. I think, I don't know how the enforcement order read. Is it just to remove the dock at this point?
That is all that it said. Please remove the dock by the end of the day, and
So-
they have done that.
I think in the future, you have every right to try and apply for a dock permit. But I think also, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that, you would have to have the permission of the person who owns or holds, or who owns the easement in order for them to legally apply for a notice of intent for a dock.
And a new Chapter 91 license.
And the 91 license, but I mean, I don't care what the state does, to be honest with you, but it comes down to the fact that, I mean, from a standpoint for the Conservation Commission, I think that would be my concern, is that, and again, I don't know if you can answer that at this point, and it seems to me as though this might be headed for your realm in court, Attorney Rivera. I don't know for a fact, but I'm not an attorney, but that's what I would say. We have to get that decision.
Yeah, I'll just try to address a couple of those issues. Number one, Ms. Caliero owns what is considered to be the, quote, dominant estate. In other words, she owns a piece of property and has the right to use the waterfront property, okay? The owner of the waterfront property has the servient estate. So she actually has superior rights to that property to use it so long as she's using it consistent with the easement. He, without objection, has allowed this dock to be there for over 30 years, which plays two directions. One, that he's essentially admitted that the dominant estate has the right to do it. And secondarily, Ms. Caliero, I always put the I before the O, actually has established adverse rights to that area over that period of time. The other secondary thing is, essentially, he only owns whatever it is to mean low water. There's certain areas that are not owned by him, et cetera, in that. So the ownership issue, I actually in some ways think that Ms. Caliero has a stronger position on ownership. What Mr. Perry was referring to is that there has been a past precedent of allowing someone who had a completely unpermitted dock to be allowed to maintain that dock. It was pile supported with a float over a period of time. And in this situation, essentially, this is all going to wash out in this year, no matter how it looks, because the interim approval does have, when the property is transferred, 1 year to reapply, and in that reapplication process, Ms. Caloiero is going to have to come to you again for approval to get through the matter. So it's a very short period of time that we're looking at. So,
Well, let me add, my, again, the interim business and the sort of intramural details that the owner needs to sort out are of interest, but they may not be germane here. I know there are older facilities that don't have orders of conditions, for example, that have licenses that put their floats in and out each year, and nobody enforces on those. This is different because the floats are on the bottom. But I think I'm not able to catalog all the structures in Yarmouth, so you see much more of that than I do. I believe that DEP has explained to me that the fact that there is an interim approval on record indicates to DEP that the dock is old enough that the interim approval was granted without an order of conditions. And I don't know how old this thing is. I guess Bates owned the place since 1980 or 84. But you still have your regulations and you have your preferences. So we're not going to, that we're here just to ask you, and I don't have any intention of debating anything. What we wanted to do was get an understanding that ownership, signatures for notices of intent notwithstanding, it's an investment of time and money and resources for the Colieros to proceed with a notice of intent. And in my experience, we have that stairway that's there. That's a structure, no different than a dock. We have the pile-supported pier portion, which is there and has been there for as many years as the floats were deployed. And the law, in my limited experience, will very likely support the dominant estate's rights to those structures as if you were paving your easement because it was muddy, or as if you needed a stairway over your easement because you can't climb down an eroding coastal bank. These are common structures in easements. So we're not concerned about that. We wanted to look at the environmental things tonight, very, very briefly, to say, before they invest what's necessary, and I was waiving a case where, yes, there was an order of conditions for something that was very small, Ed. It was a little tiny dock and a little tiny float, and there was something about 6 times the size of that out on the mudflats over Grandview Drive, which voided the license and probably would have resulted in enforcement action. So I don't see the value of that order of conditions as a difference between these two cases. What I'm trying to establish is if you have other cases where you've been cooperative, looking at circumstances, it's not like people are going to beat a path to your door asking for a dock license or an order of conditions for a new dock. This is a 30-year-old or older dock. And we're just looking to see if there's it's like a gauge. We're just gauging the tenor of the commission. Is there, is there a practical side to these folks who have this, trying to improve what's there? It's not, I can tell you, I don't think in any way, they might get 1.5 to 2 feet of water. The dock I'm speaking of got about 25 feet longer and only has 2 feet of water, and that's what you approved. So it seemed reasonable to me that we're in an area where it may be valuable for the applicant, the recipient of the enforcement order. I don't call them an applicant, they're a recipient, to proceed with ways to improve this, that it's not a categorical no. And I just saw something get waivers, so maybe there's a way through this. And we just wanted to have that discussion with you tonight. And at the same time, see if the dock could be deployed for the summer which I've heard one opinion.
I have nothing at this point. I mean, I have to listen and think more. Go ahead.
I have a fundamental problem with floats at ground. If that condition didn't exist, I'd say I would not have a problem with saying, enjoy the boating season. But because of the grounding, I have concerns.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, that also, but the thing that's kind of, I'm wondering about is the ownership, because if you have one person who, it sounds like something, as I think Ed mentioned, a judge has to decide, and not a commission like this, in terms of who has the right to place something, if the owner, who says it's the owner, and we can't determine.
No, we'd have to sort that out.
Well, you might have to, yeah, but in the meanwhile, you're saying to this commission, we want permission to put this dock back, and it would be putting it back on a property that potentially,
That's
isn't owned by the.
You wouldn't be weighing in on that. It's it's only environmental. The commission often has fine print that says there's no declaration of ownership in any of your decisions. You're not.
This thing is pretty clear to me, though. I mean,
No, but that's not, just for 1 minute, Paul, I don't disagree with what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, but it is, I mean, we do, and if we didn't care about ownership, then we wouldn't require property owners to sign a notice of intent or an RDA, so we do.
The law is actually fairly simple, and that is that an applicant has to show a reasonable color of a claim to be able to build it or to be able to put out the structure. Courts, as you say, courts decide ownership issues, but if we show easement rights, historical rights, and the like, the issuance of the order of conditions does not make any statement as to whether we have a legal right to do it. It's just we've shown enough, as they talk about, standing to be able to file an application. And I believe with 30 years, the DEP giving us a license for this, this is not a completely unlicensed structure. In fact, about the only thing that makes it a little unique is that if we had come in and this pier had a license right now and was already deployed because it was a pile-supported structure, I've had, I think you were at Barnstable at the time, said, go try to get it applied, and if you can get your permits, you're fine. If you can't get your permits, you got to take it out. And that was the things that had neither 91 licenses or the like. And so when I look at this, the only thing that makes this different than other normal, say, classic violation, someone builds an addition on their house, okay? The usual answer is, see if you can get a permit first, then we'll order you to tear it down. And this is just a little different here because it's a pier that's deployable. By the way, there were two things. Bob didn't read my note. No salt marsh. It's not sitting on the salt marsh. But I do have a picture here that actually shows the pier as deployed, if you'd like to see it. Okay, and I can bring it up. Mr. Chairman, may I approach?
Yes, sure, just bring it along here and
Okay.
show it to Brittany too.
I don't know if she's seen that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, and I'm actually showing, you can't get all on the screen there.
How long is
I
it?
see it. It's 35 feet, 40 feet.
75 feet? 75 feet afloat?
Hold it just a little bit like that. No, it extends 75
There you
feet out.
go.
I'd
Now I
say
can
we're
see it.
down to
Okay.
60.
It goes up like that.
Okay, yeah.
Well, steel pipes, I saw it well enough.
2-inch.
Sorry.
That's all right, everybody knocks me over.
I'll go home now.
Oh, good, I get to go
That's a
home.
negative vote right there, so.
Yeah, I got it, yep,
And
okay.
then, just work my way down here.
Picture you showed.
Has no, this was after they took it out. This is just the
They took out
pile
the-
supported
The whole
bit.
thing is sitting on-
Yeah,
on the-
I didn't get a picture before.
And this is all what was taken out?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
What's the depth at the end of that?
I think it's about 1.5 feet, depending on I guess at
Of the
at
tide,
low,
yeah,
I mean, average low. about 1.5 feet. Could be a little lower,
Little bit
higher.
lower.
And one other thing we didn't mention, that the Caballeros own a small skiff with an electric motor, which used to mean 2 horsepower, and it does mean 2 horsepower, but nowadays it can mean hundreds of horsepower. But no, they're not planning to pull up 25-foot center console or anything onto this, and would, if deployed, would agree to restrictions to only the use of that boat.
I don't know, I think I would say, because, again, I can't get over ownership, and I don't, and I'm not saying I don't believe you, it's just the limit of my legal experience is watching all episodes of Paper Chase back in the 1970s,
Jesus.
so, I assume things may have changed from then. So, I mean, if you can have the town solicitors sit there and say, we got no problems with it, then I guess I don't have any problems with it. But until I hear from the town's legal counsel that says that's okay, I think I would personally say, no, I'm not comfortable allowing you to put the dock back in for the summer, even with your promises. I think that's just me, but you can go to the rest of the board too, how they feel.
Oh, no, I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a matter of who owns it and who can allow it to be there. And I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, I don't know. So I think that has to be straightened out before you proceed.
Anybody different from that?
No.
So I think you've got the answer then, right?
Well, there's a caveat. You mentioned some authority of municipal legal counsel, but what's interesting about that question. Are you seeking a comfort level from your counsel that gives you some confidence that somebody with an easement with 30 years of deployment?
I would expect that they would have to look into that, yeah, and tell me, under this circumstance, that it's okay for us to go ahead and do that. But I guess that goes back to my other question, which is the second part of your question, I guess. It still goes back to the idea that it's never gone through any kind of wetland permitting whatsoever. So I'm not, again, the DEP and Chapter 91 license plans, as you have stated, it may have been this way in 1991, but what you see is not what you get now. And I think the difference in most of those situations is at least there's an order of conditions with a plan of record that we can go back to and say, this isn't right. This just isn't right. And we can modify that however we need to modify it, or we can tell them to just rip the dock out. But I think given the special circumstances of this, is that we have no previous wetland permitting. We have the added confusion of easements and the like, and we have a 91 permit. I would not be comfortable doing that. So and again, that's just and I think the rest of the board is on that same idea, I think. So.
Got any recommendations?
Well, yeah, and my actual recommendations are, okay, as it stands right now, I think you saw the pictures. There are multiple structures within the buffer zone. The stairs, the like, there's the pile-supported area there. And I think we have an enforcement order here, okay? And the real matter currently before the board is to affirm the enforcement order and/or modify it. And I think at a minimum, the enforcement order should not address.
It does not. It currently, as written, it says only to remove the floating docks.
Right,
So I wouldn't go crazy for the other portions at
And
the
the
moment.
the other materials are sitting there, they're permanent structures, they're more like my example, if you've built an addition without a permit.
I mean, those are things that have been there, and I'm with you for the 30 years. They've been there for 30 years, and if they've done any damage, that damage was done long ago, and, okay, and it's the same thing with the steps going down. I mean, it's very well vegetated all around those steps. Would you be able to permit them like that today? No. Probably not.
No.
But, you know, the fact is that they do exist, and we're not talking about that with the enforcement. I mean, the matter before us today is the enforcement order and ratifying that, and I think it's been done, and so I don't,
Just want to make sure we have clarity,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
all.
that's,
I don't want to be
The only thing it
waking up on Friday going, do we have to
just
pull out
says
this? Do we have to pull
removal
out this
of
here?"
all floating structures below the mean high water mark. That is all.
yeah, so that's been done.
It already has been done. It just does need to get ratified.
So as far as that goes, I don't have, I mean, would somebody like to make a motion to accept the enforcement order as written, approve the enforcement as written?
I moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carries unanimously, the order is issued. And I think with the other, I just, like I said, I just don't know what, I don't know what else to tell you. I think that's, I don't know where else to go with it.
Well,
We
the
just need
ownership is
some more
something that we're-
information.
We're not addressing now.
Right.
It's not practical. It's, if an application comes in that's appropriately endorsed,
Yeah, I think
By all
that's,
means,
yep.
yeah,
Okay.
bring it on,
Okay, I'm
bring
happy
it
to
on
hear
in,
you say
and
that.
we'll review that with the same level of review that we do for all of the things that you've experienced and that you've seen tonight as well, so.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You need to sign that.
Hmm?
You need to sign it.
good night to you.
Night.
Yes, we,
Right.
let's see, Oyster, is here a Oyster Cove?
That's how it was in the filing cabinet. I have yet to change it.
Hey, Revere, always a pleasure.
Good to see you, Mr. Bishop. Last time I saw him, he was wet after sailing.
When isn't he wet after sailing? When aren't you wet after sailing? When aren't you sailing?
Isn't that the way you're
Yeah.
supposed to be after sailing?
Sailing hair don't care.
Well, I did say to him in the hall that I was disappointed you met on Thursday nights because the One Design boats sail on Thursday nights.
Exactly.
I did not get to sail tonight.
We took that into consideration, though.
All right, next order of business, I'm going to take it slightly out of order because these people have waited long enough. David and Kim Tedesco, 172 Pockanocket Drive, a parcel and dock inquiry.
Good evening, thank you.
Evening.
I'm David and
Kim.
Kim Tedesco.
Hi.
We are lifelong residents of Massachusetts. We bought this home a year ago, roughly a year ago today. And we are curious about a dock inquiry, mainly because the prior owner had claimed to have all the documents in place and approvals for a dock. Turns out not to be true. Anyway, I spoke to the lawyers Stone and Reed to look into it for me. There was a man in the 90s who had owned the property, and with the amnesty program, apparently applied for Chapter 91 approval. Passed away, though, in the late 90s, and in 2006, there was a Chapter 91 approval. But you have 60 days to record it. No one ever recorded it. And I know that they never went through the town of Yarmouth either for any processes. So really, the question is, I did speak to some engineers. It's a large amount of money just to ask the question. And given the lagoon as it was built in the 60s, I guess it was, and all the docks that are there, clearly your 75-foot distance from dock to dock would never happen in this situation. But wondering if there might be something, some special consideration, given that the lagoons are kind of built for almost like a marina, if you will. You can see the pilings were there from way back when. And before we went and just asked the questions or hired a lawyer and, an engineer and spent that kind of money, we're really just looking to you for advice. You're crazy, don't bother, or, maybe there is some sort of special consideration that could possibly get us some kind of leeway. And really, that's it. It's been a long night. I don't want to take much of your time. I think that's pretty much
Where is this?
all we wanted to ask.
Show the east end of the,
I'm just gonna pull up the map quickly.
The MapQuest now.
The house on Pockanocket, the street is between that, the house is on one side of the street, the small parcel's on the other side of the street.
They're on the corner,
Yeah.
and then it's right across the street. That's the parcel.
So this is their house, and this is
Exactly.
the tiny parcel at the end of the lagoon.
is that end of it improved with a bulkhead?
This end?
Yes.
No, there's no
think so.
bulkhead.
There's vegetation, a brick walkway there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so you own the property across the street, but you also own the property right on?
That's
on
correct.
that. Okay.
Yep.
Those are two separate parcels, right?
They're actually the same
They're on the,
address.
yeah, it's one deed,
Okay.
Yeah.
although they do call it, I can't remember the number, call it Lot 54B or something like that, but yeah, it is all the
That's the
same
one
deed.
thing, I think the only good thing in your
Well,
favor at that point, but
Yeah, when I took those pictures today, I did go here by mistake,
Oh, yeah.
and they do have stairs and a bulkhead from this exact same parcel in the northernmost lagoon.
Yeah, I think,
what are the rest of the docks looking around? I mean, are they docks, or are those docks in right now, or?
No,
are
this
those-
is a
those are
winter
just
view, but
Steps going down.
it looks very similar to how it is
so,
on this side.
Brittany, is that the only unimproved east end I think all the others are improved.
I think all of them are.
I think they are.
There's some are
Yeah,
just
that
grass,
one
yeah.
is,
Yeah, all sheathing
this one
or wood,
looks like there's a bulkhead.
pretty sure. Yeah, that's improved,
it.
yeah.
That one is, yeah.
I have a picture from Google Earth that has has boats
All
in
the
it.
docks in.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, oops.
Oh, they're pulling straight in.
this is
Yeah, they pull straight
the
in.
one that Brittany went to by mistake. This is theirs. I don't think there's anything else there. Oh, here's another one, but I don't think
Yeah.
there's anything there.
That's across from us, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
That I don't know.
Yeah, that's,
Oops.
yeah, see, I
so
think,
one-
I think
there
that's
is
the
another
only
one
one.
that's
with-
unimproved as well,
Yeah,
but
it's
doesn't
farther
have any-
south,
Right.
farther south is
There's
the
one
other one that's
here.
unimproved.
When you say unimproved, does that mean,
No sheathing, no bulkhead, it's just
oh, like a
material running down to the water.
That's
Right.
the wider part, but, so you can see,
Yeah.
yes, no.
would that be better for the environment, a bulkhead, or not?
I think you could make an argument that it's better. No storm runoff into the water and things.
I'm not quite sure why it was never done when they set up the fingers
I
to
know.
begin with, but
Yeah.
So you're looking to put a float in there, is that what you're looking to do?
Honestly,
There's this one on,
do as much as putting a bulkhead, if it helped the cause,
think there
and
is a bulkhead.
some kind of seasonal floating dock, yeah.
Okay.
About the size of what that one?
Yeah, probably about that size.
They all match, pretty much, yeah.
And maybe just get kayaks in and out too, and like you said, like that size, yeah.
We would certainly hire an engineer at that point, but again, before, I don't know, I mean, obviously, it's a pretty big project.
I'm sure you watched what happened at Skippy's Marina. They did a pretty significant improvement project there.
It was before we were there, so I haven't seen it,
just-
but
Yeah.
And further south, what was that Chatham company that did the bulkhead replacement a year ago?
Where?
Furthest, the fingers further south.
Oh. Oh, I can't remember.
Anyway, there've been a lot of replacement improvement projects done in the fingers over the last few years.
Okay.
So they're all coming due.
along Pockanocket, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
pretty significant project, but it
Sure,
results in a, a nice finished project.
it does, and it adds a lot of value to the home too, so I would definitely be interested in it, so.
I just don't know what to tell you other than, I mean, it's hard to say without seeing something, something that I can look at as to what is approvable or not.
Well, I guess like, to me, I'm not a lawyer, and I got a great education tonight hearing all this stuff. But the fact that obviously the docks almost touch each other in these fingers, is that okay? There's got to be a variance for that, I would assume, correct?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, this is not,
No
this would
75
not
feet
meet
thing.
any of the dock requirements, except, well, we probably get the 3 foot.
Yeah,
That, we may
That's
not
about it.
even,
3
we may
feet.
not even
yeah.
get that either, but,
Now, are there 2 piles already in there?
looks like
I
one,
think there's
right?
3.
Just one. Oh,
No, there's just the one, right?
that's the
You
same
can't see
one.
them.
Yeah, I don't know if the picture caught, yeah, there's one there behind the, see that one?
That's in the bank though, isn't it?
I think this one's in the bank.
Oh, yeah, that might not be in the water itself,
And
yeah.
I bet it's so
I bet
silted
that
in
was an
there.
out-haul,
Yeah, right.
I think that was probably an out haul at some
Or
point.
an out
Somebody
haul,
probably
yeah.
did an out haul at one point and just,
Yeah, I think there's that one and the one in the middle.
It looks so
Pretty
silted in.
there. Which you mean what? You'd have to dredge it?
that might be another
another
alternative
question,
to
yeah.
do an out haul.
Yeah. But, walking down there and making a walkway, it's just,
Well, then you have to put a pathway, I mean, you're gonna have to get a pathway and.
seems to me
There
that,
is a pathway already there, it's a brick pathway.
It kind of stops.
Doesn't
It
go-
doesn't,
Like a
It
bank.
doesn't go
Oh, it
down.
stops right there,
Right,
okay.
the top
Yeah,
of the
and
bank.
it doesn't
Drop off,
go
right?
all the way.
I would prefer to see a formal plan with a bulkhead as a solution to it, because again, is there one other one out of the 10 fingers in that development?
That don't have one.
Doesn't have one, so,
That doesn't have a bulkhead
right.
at the end?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's
there's
only
one further south. that
Right,
is-
so
that doesn't have a bulkhead.
2 out of 10, approximately.
So, I mean, it sounds like it would be something you would entertain then.
Yeah, I would.
I think so. Like I said, I mean, how do you even apply the dock and pier regulations to that?
Yeah, like these little,
I only count 4 or 5 fingers, but 1, 2, 3.
Well, you got the 2 up at Skippy, up by,
Right.
across from Skippy's, and then,
You're talking about this huge one up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, if you want to count that. Otherwise, 1,
2,
2,
3, 4,
3,
5, right?
4, 5. 5 I
Only
count with
4.
Skippies. And out of those, according to my little thing
Five,
here,
6.
only
All right.
one.
Copy.
I mean, it's hard to tell
Right,
with
it's the
this
same thing.
very
That
bad
one's-
aerial
that's done.
image.
I mean, the fact remains is like, in what, 1955, 60, that was all marsh.
Yeah,
They filled it in,
Excavated it.
basically put the fingers in, constructed it directly for that, thinking, I guess, that they were gonna be like a little Florida.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess I would entertain a project that you could, if you can figure all the, I mean, if it works with all the ownership and I mean, you clearly own it, so that's a big hurdle. That all, what is that? That's,
It's land containing shellfish.
shellfish?
Yeah, so you'd have land containing shellfish, land under the ocean,
I'm surprised there's shellfish
coastal
in there.
bank.
Yeah.
How can you be I mean, I know there's mussels.
It's gotta be all
mussel
silt.
there,
That's what it says.
but I cannot believe that there's something else there.
Just says it's
Have Dave go do some surveying.
Thing about all those docks in Bass River that
So I
kill
guess
them.
I guess what the board is saying, that they would entertain some sort of a project. It's just depending on how much you want to invest in it.
Right.
I know it could be substantial.
Formal improvement to match the adjacent
properties.
work.
I mean, the thing you have to make sure is whatever you put there doesn't impede the two houses on both
Right.
sides.
Right.
Yeah.
So they get their boats in and out.
You have a boat,
No?
So we could,
just
whatever
kayaks
we can,
and,
whatever
or
we-
a small boat?
we're allowed
yeah.
to. Yeah,
Well,
we would
if
love
we-
to, we would
yeah,
love to have a boat.
Yeah,
Even like I said,
Kayaks are nice.
a smaller one.
kayaks are nice.
Low impact.
Yeah. All right, I guess we take the next steps.
Fair enough. Then it's not crazy to at least hire an engineer. I appreciate your time very
I know.
much.
Thank you.
This will be,
Good night.
As you can tell.
Your
from
time, for sitting there and listening to
You
all
might
this.
be well served to speak to some of the other homeowners that did that
Right.
repair in the last couple of years and see what their experience was.
do you need approval of the abutters? Or is that just a,
They do get notified. They can come and speak at the hearings.
well, so far they've been very kind neighbors, so hopefully, well, we'll have some conversations with them before we do anything, obviously.
Yeah, I doubt you would have opposition to that.
People are, hey, when you put it in a dock, you put it in a dock? Put it in a dock. So a lot of people had asked because I think they had heard that the 2006 Chapter 91 thing or something like, so they all
Well, it's
thought.
gonna work to their advantage too, because if you're putting in a bulkhead or something across that back, then it's
It'll-
gonna further shore up the integrity of their
Bingo.
bulkheads on either side, so. While they may be nice people,
And I'm sure they don't mind, yeah. Bulkhead, I
they do
assume,
have their own
Agenda.
alternative
Their own
motion
agenda, yeah.
as well, so.
it's okay, I don't mind as long as they're okay with it. As long as the bulkhead, I'm assuming, is gonna have to be on my property, right? It can't go
Yes.
further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I might have to meet theirs a little bit around the corner or something, but I'm sure they won't
Our
mind.
engineer will take care of that for you.
Yeah, you don't
That's
worry
all,
about
that's all in the engineering.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
that. All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
That was entertaining.
No, I thought I'd be bored. It wasn't bad.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't tell me.
It's Dan Ojala's fault.
No,
certainly
actually, it was, other business, approval of meeting minutes, June 15th, 2023, we good?
It's okay.
Good.
So David's
second.
motioning, you're,
Second.
Ellie seconding, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Any other reasonable, business not reasonably anticipated?
No.
Can I ask, do we have any movement on replacing commissioners?
We have a single applicant, and I have asked the Board of Selectmen representative who handles appointments if they are going to schedule an interview, and she said, yes, she will schedule an interview. I don't know when.
Okay.
There's only one she on the
Appointments chair of the
selectmen.
Board of Selectmen. But she said that the commission is welcome to attend.
Oh. I forget the makeup of the board anymore.
It's,
Yeah, I
Orcus.
know,
We know who it is.
we know. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All the favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. We stand adjourned at 7:42.
Way too late.